Good morning. Good morning. In an effort to get started on time for our full committee meeting of business, we are going to get started now. I'm going to call to order the December 12th, 2019 Mission Fulfillment Committee. Welcome. It looks like we have 11 regents. Looks like Regent Beeson is gone for whatever reason. Again, we have a full agenda. And just to be brief, I am going to welcome student representatives Pozo Garcia. You're from the Twin Cities campus, is that correct? And student representative DeMuth from Crookston.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for what you do with the your positions in student government. So we are going to get started. I think the first thing we might as well, there's no other announcements for the good of the committee, so I think we will just get started, and I'm going to call Vice Provost McMaster and Professor Gregory Kalstead to the presentation table. I don't want to call it the witness table, the presentation table. And they are going to give us, actually, quite frankly, today we're going to have 4 informational presentations, which I think will be really, really good for all of us to learn about. They're going to give us an informational tour of the changes to the Twin Cities campus, what I call the general education requirements. I think we're actually going to possibly even think about changing the names from liberal education to general education. So I guess with no further ado, Vice Provost McMaster, you're welcome to proceed.
Good. Thank you, Chair Anderson and members of the committee. Today we're going to go through a bit of the history of how our liberal education, general education requirements came to be, and then have a conversation about a recent effort to take a look at the requirements and perhaps change the requirements, and then we're going to give you an update as to what happened with the Faculty Senate last Thursday and a discussion that they had around these requirements. So if we look at the UMTC liberal education requirements, there are a few basic principles that we wanted to start off with in terms of how the faculty look at these requirements. One is that they're owned by the faculty. The curriculum is owned by the faculty, all aspects of the curriculum, and in particular, our liberal education requirements. And they're approved by the Faculty Senate. So any changes to the requirements have to go through multiple committees, but the final step is with the Faculty Senate. There have been 3 major committees over time that have looked at these requirements, one in the mid-1990s, another about 12 years ago, and then the more recent effort that we'll talk about. The general philosophy with liberal education is around something we call the cores and themes. We'll say more about that in a moment. We're very sensitive to the number of credits in that curriculum because we want to make sure our students are graduating on time. The requirements that you're going to see today include all of the writing requirements that we're not going to do a deep dive into for time purposes. And then we're very mindful of the Minnesota transfer curriculum that we're bound to as part of the state system. A few other comments here. One is many of our students do arrive at this institution with significant lib-ed credits already completed through PSEO, AP, college, and the schools. Sometimes up to 30 or 40 credits have been completed. And one of the values we have with liberal education is that our very best faculty are in the classroom as much as possible teaching these courses. Again, getting into a bit of the history, before 1994, there were what were called the Chambers requirements. Really, these were collegiate-based requirements. There were no university-wide general education requirements before this point in time. From 1994 on, based on the Howe Committee of 1994, campus-wide requirements were indeed created. The base of that set of requirements is depicted on the right-hand side here, where again you have core requirements. These are really the general education requirements, the way you'd think of them, including historical perspectives, literature, biological sciences, the domains of knowledge, the major domains of knowledge, in essence, ways of knowing epistemology that we feel our students need to be exposed to. At the bottom is something that's a little unique to our institution, Twin Cities, and those are called the theme requirements. These are intended to bring relevance to society in many ways, societal issues. And there are myriad different theme requirements that one could think about. For our purposes at the university, initially we identified four: citizenship and public ethics, cultural diversity, the environment, and international perspectives. I'm going to say I'm going to say something about writing here. The writing requirements were established at the same time. All students have to take a freshman writing course or AP or PSEO out of it, and they have to take 4 what are called WI, writing intensive courses that are offered throughout the curriculum. Several of these have to be at the 3,000 level or above, and one of those writing intensive courses, WI courses, has to be in their major. As Provost Hansen has reminded the faculty community on a regular basis, periodically it's the responsibility of the faculty to review these requirements and think about possible changes, given, again, changes in society. The next phase really came a bit later, 2005 to 7, where another committee was put together to review the first How committee report and requirements. And there were some slight changes made 12 years ago, some slight changes of the core requirements. One theme and one new theme was added 12 years ago. That was technology and society. At the same time, in terms of the requirements for students had to take all 7 cores. They've always had to take all 7 core courses. And in 2010, the decision was made that they would have to take 4 of the 5 themes, not 5 of the 5 themes, again, for degree completion purposes. So again, created in 1994, revisited in 2007. If we look at the actual distribution of courses, this matrix gets into that. It shows the number of courses offered in each of the core theme categories. To cut to the chase, our students do not have trouble finding LibEd courses. It's in no way an impediment for timely graduation. One critical point on this curriculum that is going to come up later as well, the structure is established such that there are double certified courses. Those are called double dippers. What that means is that a course can count for both a core and a theme. In fact, there are what are called triple dippers. Those are the prize courses at the university because the triple dippers count for a core, a theme, and a WI writing requirement. Okay, so students tend to gravitate towards those because they can knock off 3 requirements at once. So if you look at this matrix, for instance, you can see the number of courses that are just core, the number of courses that are just theme, and then the double dippers. So there are only 30 courses, there are 30 courses, not just, that fulfill only a physical science, but no theme. Physical science course would be chemistry, physics, or sciences. There are 20 classes, for instance, if you dig into the matrix, that fulfill a social science core and a diversity and social justice theme. That's a double dipper. You can see that some of the matrix is empty. Very few of the mathematical thinking core courses over on the right-hand side, the eastern border of the matrix, actually fulfill a theme. In fact, only one, technology and society. So that's the structure of the LE requirements and how the number of courses are distributed throughout that curriculum. This chart depicts the distribution of LE classes across the undergraduate colleges. And the first 2 rows show the core enrollments, then the theme enrollments, and finally, the total enrollments, both number of enrollments and then percent of enrollments offered by each college. So as you would expect with a big university and a big liberal education curriculum, 46% of the total liberal education curriculum is offered by the College of Liberal Arts. And in particular, they load up on theme courses on arts, humanities, literature, and social sciences. CSE, Science and Engineering, offers 26%, CEHD 7.5%. One can see that CSOM only offers 2.5% of the curriculum. They're not heavily involved in offering courses, gen ed courses. If we drill down a bit to the individual core theme level, which we didn't do in this presentation, you'd find quite logically that CBS offers a high percentage of the biological science core, and CSE offers a high percentage of the physical science core. So you'd find logic in the colleges and their offerings in the structure. So in 2017, a decision was made to look at the requirements once again based on the strategic plan of the university, based on the development of a grand challenge curriculum and other changes. And Provost Hanson requested that a pre-planning committee be established to start to look at the potential and possibility for change. That committee met for 2 years, looking at different models of delivery around the country, what were the pros and cons of the current structure. And the decision was made, yes, it was probably time to take a look at changes again to the curriculum. The pre-planning committee morphed into a liberal education redesign committee, what we call LERC, L-E-R-C. That met from November 2017 up to about 2 weeks ago when the last meeting was held. Sally Gregory Kolstad was chair, Professor Kolstad was chair of that committee. And she'll talk more about some of the work of that committee. That committee looked at how would we change the curriculum. Again, the first committee looked at should we change the curriculum. As this committee started its work, the Liberal Education Redesign Committee, there were a set of key questions that drove the work. And I'm not going to read every one of these, but a few of the more important considerations as the committee started its work in the redesign process, what design would serve the UMTC students best? A core curriculum, continuation adjustment of the current set of requirements that we had. That's really what was done in 2007 to 8, is an adjustment to the how requirements of 1994. There was not a significant wholesale change in the nature of the requirements or a different kind of model. What is the best credit load for a basic required curriculum? The outcome needs to enable timely graduation, enough credits from major work, and enough credits so that students can do some elective work as well. One of the pressure points in any lib ed curriculum, gen ed curriculum, is with science and engineering, particularly engineering, where the engineering curriculum is very tightly packaged. It's based on ABET requirements, and there's not a great deal of flexibility in an engineering curriculum to add massive numbers of lib ed, gen ed requirements. And so in many ways, that becomes one of the bottlenecks in the liberal education curriculum. Another question that was asked, should the curriculum be offered only by tenure and tenure track faculty and long-term instructors, as is in the current arrangement? So basically in the report of 2007, the requirement was that only tenure and tenure track faculty and long-term instructors could teach in this curriculum. We wanted the finest instructors there. So we were considering, should we allow advanced doctoral students and other types of instructors to teach these classes? And you can see some of the other questions.
So, well, thank you, Regent Anderson, Provost Hanson, other regents. I appreciate your time and attention today. My goal is to tell you briefly something of what that Liberal Education Redesign Committee did since it received its charge in November of 2017. What I want to do is summarize my report and some basic recommendations before going over the visuals that quite succinctly summarize the major framework that emerged. And at the end, I want to outline the process of consultation which informed our work. So for the first several months, we met biweekly for hour-and-a-half meetings. The committee members, 22 people from across the university representing all undergraduate admitting colleges, brainstormed about our respective and collective visions about the purpose of general education in a college curriculum. We filled whiteboards, both with aspirational principles as well as with specific content that seemed important, even essential for UMN graduates in the 2020s. We also looked at about 9 other comparable universities' requirements, especially those that had recently updated or dramatically changed their required curriculum. In addition, as shown on this slide, we thought about various kinds of issues. So we reviewed a number of things. We were particularly interested in questions related to transfer credit, as Bob has already suggested, given the reality that a third of our students are transfer students. We looked at questions relating to total credits that are required by majors, and we studied patterns of recent student enrollments in LE courses. We found, as you can see here and in Bob's earlier slides, that a majority of our students do come with transfer credits, in addition to those official transfer students coming in from other institutions. They bring, as Bob suggested, PSEO, AP, and other credits as freshmen. And many of those credits also count for liberal education. But that's not universally true that students have those. Access to those opportunities is not equally distributed to first-generation students, to students of color, or to those who are educated in smaller towns and rural areas beyond the Twin Cities. However, it did not appear that LE required credits had been a hindrance in any way to four-year graduation rates so far, because so many other factors are involved in that graduation rate. And the data shows that students often found numerous courses, sometimes within their majors, which met some requirements. Required credits in majors varied. 24 of 154 majors on this campus had some difficulty. Those were primarily, as Bob suggested, in engineering. It also turned out that music had problems and nutrition had problems. Those are both places where, again, accreditation or comparable work in other kinds of institutions challenged them to have large number of courses. The nature of the challenges were never straightforward, however, because analysis revealed that those who come in as new high school students sometimes inadvertently take more LE courses than they encountered simply because the courses are widely available across the curriculum. And so indeed, as you can see here, the number of students who actually completed LE courses was really quite high. The average student had to take an average of 6 courses in order to complete their LE requirements. And in fact, what it takes is 27 credits if in fact you do, as Bob suggested, the double certification in those courses. But before I go on to the next slide, which shows graphic visuals, I want to summarize some of the significant elements in the 17-page single-spaced report, including appendices, which you were not asked to read, that looked at all aspects of the LE curriculum. We did decide that the model of writing-intensive courses, which are now widely integrated into the curriculum, provided a really interesting and useful model that could be used for other areas that seemed fundamental and to offer skills that we thought all students needed to graduate with. One of these was quantitative thinking and mathematics, and the other was ethics. The goal was to try and see if we could have those topics also integrated across the curriculum in multiple courses so that the students gained access to information about those from multiple points of view. The other course that we thought should be looked at in that way was ethics, and that actually came from a meeting with students, because the students said right now they're taking ethics in their basic liberal education courses, often in the first or second year, and they said, really, we'd like to be thinking about ethics when we graduate, the place where we have our majors. And moreover, as we're encountering ethics, it's so different in different settings that it would really be helpful to have ethics integrated into the curriculum. So we took both of those suggestions, quantitative thinking and ethics, and said maybe there's some other way to include those in the curriculum in a more integrative way. The committee also looked very closely at the definitions for all of the topics that we currently have in the curriculum, and we spent several weeks revising and rewriting and rethinking what it was we thought in the 2020s ought to be in those thematic courses, and even updating what is in the disciplines that we needed to have students addressing. There were also recommendations, as Bob suggested, about who could teach the general education courses, a configuration of oversight of those courses, and suggestions that might facilitate interdisciplinarity. But now to show the results of what we did. This slide shows, after 3 semesters and a summer's worth of work, in June of 2019, what we presented to the faculty. This proposed graphic shows really a summary of 3 plans that went out to the faculty, Plan A, B, and C. Basically, they looked the same. The one distinction was that the question of how many courses in discipline and how many courses in theme ought to be taken. Plan A said, let's take 6 courses in disciplinary inquiry, 2 courses in thematic inquiry, and those are slightly shorter numbers now because both quantitative reasoning and ethics had been pulled down into that new category of fundamentals. And so the first plan was, these are the courses that students will take, and they will take all 6 of the disciplines, and they will take 2 of the themes. Many people on the committee were concerned because they very much valued those themes. All 4 of those themes, everybody agreed were important, so how could we balance that out? And so Plan B said that students could choose 5 of 6 disciplinary courses and then 3 of 4 thematic courses. And so indeed it tried to say, let's have a choice in both of those categories. And Plan C said, let the students decide. They need to take a total number of courses, but they can decide whether to drop one of the themes or one of the disciplinary courses. We put that out, and we also created at that point an online forum for faculty to respond to these questions. And it very quickly became clear that the faculty, at least, liked Plan A of these 3 plans the best. And so Plan A was the one that we went forward with. So Plan A was the one that was most talked about. Again, I'll just repeat that it had first-year writing to include content and also a topic that the writing program was also now considering, and that is thinking more broadly about writing and including something called information literacy. We want our students to not only write, but to read carefully and to understand how data gets used in being persuasive in writing. It now had 6 disciplinary courses. It had 2 thematic inquiry courses, but as we moved forward, we decided after the consultation, the committee looked at those responses and said, in the thematic area, maybe what we ought to do is group them. The groupings represent a concern that students who were in the liberal arts side of the house might be more tempted to take the courses that had dealt with global and with diversity issues in this country, and that the students who were in the sciences might gravitate to the courses that dealt mostly with environment and technology. We wanted to be sure that the students were really addressing both of those arenas, and so in that thematic inquiry area, we said, well, you choose one of the 2 in diversity global perspectives, and you choose one of the 2 in technology and environment. With that in mind, we also said it was going to be very important for students to see all 4 of the courses so that they might, in fact, elect to take more. We made the very dramatic challenge to the current system, and that is we said these courses would not be dual certified. The argument was based on the fact that early on in those open forums that we had 4 years ago, the faculty said that they had wanted a curriculum that was more transparent. They felt the students were kind of going in and looking at a matrix and saying, how can I get all my requirements met? We wanted students to be choosing courses and recognizing that the course they took had a particular integrity. The committee absolutely understood that, in fact, many disciplinary courses might be on one of those themes, or a thematic course was being taught by a faculty in the discipline, but the faculty member was going to be required to say, in this course, we're focusing either on that disciplinary inquiry or on that theme. So this was the dramatic change that came up in our committee recommendations. And we had, moreover, this idea of fundamentals that could be overlaid with any course in the curriculum. It didn't have to be an LE. We were hoping to really integrate ethics and quantitative thinking into this system. There was pushback, I guess it's fair to say. Many faculty were concerned. They're already embedded in these dual certified courses. And so a group of faculty from outside the committee began to meet with some of the members of our committee, and they said, maybe there's another plan. Maybe we can do this differently, but still have double certified courses. Interestingly enough, that response was based on the fact that what was in the report, the written report, the idea of fundamentals, the requirement for all of the writing as it currently is, the topics themselves and the definitions that they had were accepted by the people who looked at a new curriculum. But what it did was it now allowed, again, double certification across these areas and excuse me, I need a drink, I guess, across these areas, and so that students could take something that might cross between fundamentals and disciplinary, between thematic and disciplinary, or something else. But in any case, it allowed for this now double certification, but also not for triple certification. Thank you very much, President Gable. So that was our proposed Plan D. We recognize that across the country, in fact, a lot of the courses that were being offered by other universities, typically in the disciplinary area, also did focus on having diversity and global perspectives, often as one kind of combination requirement, so that students are really understanding diversity in our society. These two plans, Plans A and D, were presented to the Senate in November for discussion and brought back for a vote in December. It was a lively meeting with a wide range of opinions, and the outcome was that Plan A was voted down. The issues that were raised were anticipated, and in particular, it was a rejection of a change from the policy of double certification to single certification. Discussion was very wide-ranging, and the Senate meeting actually went overtime, but in fact, no vote was ever taken on Plan D. It did seem that this committee, that this university's faculty was not yet ready for this change because it still had some concerns about Plan D, and I will note that one of the things that Plan D does is it takes the total number of required courses, if everyone did double certify, down to 24 credits, and some people thought that was fewer credits than should be required overall. So what I have to tell you is that the university will continue to operate under the current liberal education curriculum as we now move into the spring semester. But at this point, Vice Provost and Dean of Graduate Education McMaster will make a few comments about the transfer curriculum, which some of you inquired about. But I would like to note, as we make this transition, that transfer students were very much considered as we were dealing with our new curriculum and devising it. The transfer curriculum was always on our mind as we pursued those questions. Bob.
Sure. So just briefly, I wanted to mention the transfer curriculum. This is something that was developed in the 1990s, and basically it harmonizes the general education curricula across the Mid-State system and the U of M system. To cut to the chase, if a student completes the entirety of the gen ed curriculum at Normandale, transfers to the University of Minnesota, that curriculum is considered done. I'll leave it at that. And then finally, we document here just some of the feedback collection process that was used as the LERC did their work. I think you can read this, so we won't go into detail here, and we'll turn to questions.
Thank you, Vice Provost McMaster and Professor Gregory Colstead. Thank you very much. Provost Hanson, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I just wanted to thank the Vice Provost and the members of the Liberal Education Redesign Committee and the faculty and the University Senate for their engagement with this, and the students who were consulted and also commented. This may seem dry and technocratic, but this is a large university with a rich array of courses, and in a way there is nothing more important about undergraduate education than thinking, what is it that we think every student from the University of Minnesota should know and be able to do? And that's what this discussion is about. What do we require of every student, because we think there's something that every University of Minnesota student should know and be able to do. And that's what they were discussing. That's why it's so serious, and that's why it's very difficult too. So that I wanted to again thank them for their really sterling efforts.
And I have to say, I appreciated hearing the strategy on how that segment where you wanted STEM students to make sure they took classes in social justice and diversity, so you had to take one of the two in each of the categories. It's interesting to me just to hear the strategy, how you make sure that all students take in those categories. So with that, I just want to open this up for questions to my colleagues, and we've got a few minutes to ask them, and we'll move on. I see Regent Simonson.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Just a quick question on course content. Maybe I should know this. Is it developed by the faculty or instructor and then reviewed by a committee? You know, we're reading a lot from different universities now with some political issues that get put into some of this stuff, and so I was just wondering how we do it.
Sure. Chair Anderson and Regent Simonson. There's a committee that was created during the Howe report, for the Howe report. It's called the Council for Liberal Education. The Council for Liberal Education is appointed by the Vice Provost and approved by the Senate Committee on Educational Policy. It, again, represents the entire university in terms of faculty expertise. And when a faculty member wants to propose a new course for Gen Ed, liberal education, the proposal is sent to this committee. The committee very carefully vets that proposal based on the criteria in the original report. And then there's often a toing and froing with the faculty member about perhaps some changes. And so that's the process, is there's a broad-based committee that approves the courses.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Provost McMaster. Regent Powell.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair Anderson, and thanks, presenters. Thanks, Professor Kolstad, for leading this work. So I'm just trying to make sure that sort out in my own mind kind of the priorities, and it seems like the faculty affirmed, writing intensity courses as really a key thing, which, it doesn't matter, what I think, it's a faculty deal, but it seems like a good one. Extending quantitative reasoning across courses, which also to me seems like a really good thing to do. Extending ethical reasoning across, multiple courses, that's good. And then sort of updating and refining the content of thematic courses. So, so it seems like those were priorities. Mm-hmm. And that those have been, affirmed and debated. So the issue is around dual versus single. Sort of that's where you're hung up.
That's right.
And how, maybe give us a sense for how long you think it'll take to resolve that, so that we can complete this work and move on.
Al?
Regent Powell, thank you for the question. That is a good question. I don't think we know for sure where this will go next. It seems to me that the sense of the Senate was relatively positive about those elements. It may be that can be somehow revisited with the current curriculum in some fashion. That's one possibility. It's also a possibility that we will now sort of sit back for a year or two, and then with a new provost, think about moving forward with a different committee if people still want to see some kind of change. So I don't have a crystal ball to know where we're going to go next with this. There will probably be a conversation with the head of the FCC, the Faculty Consultative Committee, which is the body that represents the faculty and organizes the Senate meetings to talk about what might happen next. But Bob may have a different set of opinions.
Sure.
Yeah, Regent Anderson and Regent Powell. Another issue that came up during the conversation was around workload and the amount of effort it was going to take to change this curriculum. When you change a curriculum like this, there's a massive amount of effort that is involved in recertification. And I think one of the questions that came up, given the nature of the changes, was it worth the effort that was going to go into looking at every single course again and recertifying that course? So workload was one other issue that I think came into this by the faculty.
Thank you. Thank you. Regent Shu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. I went to school here apparently before there was the liberal education requirement, before 1994. So I don't really have any personal views on this, but from talking to students, my concerns are that we're almost we're looking for some way of imposing more requirements on our students. I'm not sure that's such a great idea. Students who want to learn these types of things and take these types of courses, obviously they can do so. And, if, one thing, for example, when I was in school, we didn't have really an opportunity even to take certain courses that weren't, I don't know what the terminology was at the time, but one example is like I couldn't have taken a Chinese class and had that count towards my graduation at the time. So I do think that whoever is kind of behind trying to force our students to take certain types of classes in diversity, for example, or whatever, I really don't think that's a good idea. I think what we have is working. We have graduation rates that are that have been improving, and I think if we get in the way of that and we force our students to take certain classes that they're not interested in, it's really not going to help them. They can always learn that on their own. They don't have to take a course and get a credit to do it. So I think it's a lot of work that up until now has I think received a fair amount of criticism, and I don't know. I don't think it should be continued. The discussion should be continued at all after this.
Thank you, Regent Chu. That's maybe a discussion for a different day because that's a lot there. It's a lot there. We're going to have Regent Davenport speak, and then we're going to be on to our next subject.
Just quickly, thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the work of the committee. I know this is a big lift to do, and I know it's review of the liberal ed is being done at each of our campuses, and there's a lot of work there. I support the work you're doing. I think that is a big question on the double counting, because that's how many students will get double majors and have that room and still complete in 4 years. And I would just go back to the original question that the provost posed that I think resonated with the faculty, and that is what represents the University of Minnesota's education in the liberal education and our graduates. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Regent Davenport. And like I said earlier, we've got 4 topics today, all informational topics. We're not taking a vote on any of them, so we are just going to be moving through them. The next topic is going to be on campus climate from our I guess I would call them our non-metro campuses. That's one way to describe them all as once. Crookston, Duluth, Morris, and Rochester. This is again a discussion. I think Vice President Go is going to lead us off with just some general basics about campus climate. Again, we've got multiple presenters, so I would like the presenters to somewhat be knowledgeable of the time limits we have, so we can get some time for some more questions and things too. Vice President Go, when you are ready, I understand you are going to kick this off, so go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Chair Anderson, members of the committee, I'm very pleased to be joined by my system colleagues to continue this important conversation about improving campus climate and to take this conversation system-wide. As you can tell, we've got a pretty full panel here, so my job is to be brief and get out of the way. But we thought it was important to bridge the conversation that began in October at the board meeting where we introduced the difficult notion of capturing what is campus climate. So I wanted to just remind us of several concepts, that the notion of experience, the notion of respect, the notion of belonging, and the notion of autonomy. As we described, campus climate is desired but quite elusive in its definition because of the comprehensive nature of the subject matter. But we did at least capture that most of the science and practice around campus climate describes it as about the experience that individuals and groups have on our campuses. And more important than the experience is the quality of the experience that is fundamental to what is campus climate. In regards to the experience then, we've also agreed that it's not just the presence of diversity of experiences and views, it is how these diversity of views and experiences interact on our campuses, or what we call interactional diversity, that ultimately fuels what is considered or one's impression of how campus climate is experienced by our communities. In regards to this experience then is the notion of respect. For all that perhaps scholars debate about, they agree that research has shown that respect is what contributes to one's perception of campus climate. How one is valued, how one is respected is fundamental to the experience of how campus climate is viewed by individuals and by groups. And then in regards to that notion of respect, there are two other elements that the research has found. One is a sense of belonging, and the other a sense of autonomy, meaning to say that it's not just important that we create spaces for individuals, faculty, staff, students to feel like they can thrive, that they can achieve their highest potential. It is also just as important that when they try to do that they don't have to hide or minimize their identities, their views, and their experiences. So these are two separate but related concepts of belonging and autonomy, and they underlie what we are talking about in regards to campus climate. Having described all of the above, the challenge then is how do we assess campus climate, which is a complex issue, but for that reason we have begun conversations with the system chancellors, with my colleagues at this table, with the Office for Undergraduate Education, with the Office for Institutional Research, to see if there are similar or even the same instruments that we can use to survey our system campuses, so that we can potentially have the ability to compare similarities and differences, and so that we can possibly support a coordinated effort to support and improve campus climate on all our campuses. The task of improving campus climate is no less daunting since my presentation in October, because we also recognize that there are a myriad of social, cultural, political situations, circumstances that are beyond our control, and that can change campus climate in a second. But I remain optimistic and look forward to future possibilities, and I look forward to the presentations from my colleagues. First, John Hoffman, Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs from our Crookston campus. Lisa Irwin, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs from our Duluth campus. Sandra Olsen-Loy, Vice Chancellor for and Dean of Student Life at the Duluth campus.
Close, good.
Close enough.
We're all good.
Sandra Olsen-Loy, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs on our Morris campus, and Andrew Williams, our Vice Chancellor for Student Success, Engagement, and Equity on our Rochester campus. John?
I was just going to say, Vice President Goh, it's amazing when you guys sat up there that either they're trained really well or it's a great coincidence that it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the way you're scheduled to present. I just thought that was kind of interesting. So we're going to go with Vice Chancellor Hoffman. You want to start from Crookston?
Chair Anderson, members of the board, and students, so that you know, I started on my far right, your far left, and Dr. Goh corrected my seat. The University of Minnesota Crookston, in nearly every way you can consider, has become more increasingly diverse over the past 10 years. To speak specifically to racial and ethnic diversity, let's place it in context. Our Senate district, in that district, about 8% of the individuals are persons of color. In Polk County, it's 14%. Our incoming class this year, the most racially diverse on campus in our institution's history, was 21% students of color. And as we look a mile down the road to Crookston schools, the students there are 32% students of color. That is our future. It's part of the reason this is so important. As we consider enrollment trends and the number of high school students who will be graduating in the coming 5 years, we know that selective institutions will reach further into their pools, and we will have to be positioned to serve an increasingly diverse student population. At Crookston, we are connecting the concept of climate to student success in a variety of ways, and so we're starting with a conversation around our first-year student retention. Overall, we are retaining 72.6% of our students. That's lower than elsewhere around the system, but it is 2% higher than the national average in higher education and like institutions. If we look at our rural students, those from greater Minnesota, we are thrilled to share with you that though those students perform at a lower level across the country, they perform exceptionally well at the University of Minnesota Crookston. Students who receive Pell Grants and first-generation college students, there is a there's an achievement gap there that is comparable to what we see elsewhere around the country. And then for our students of color, there's a significant gap that we have to attend to. As we look at the NSSE, which is the National Survey of Student Engagement, we administered this in 2016 and will re-administer this spring. We see that our students, and this is a reflection of climate, that they are more engaged than our peer institutions in leadership experiences and active learning. However, when it comes to collaboration, interacting with individuals from different backgrounds, and connecting their learning to societal issues, our scores have been lower. And there are larger gaps when we look at that between our white students and our students of color. This has led us to look, among other things, at the IDI, the Intercultural Development Inventory, which we administered with our leaders, and we've done some follow-up with qualitatively with campus. We tend to place ourselves at the minimization. And if I can just use a personal story, my stepson has autism. And when I first learned of the news, I saw that very much from a polarization perspective of what's wrong with him and right with the rest of the kids. Later, as he got into school, I learned well, how can he be more like other kids? Can we just minimize the fact of what's going on? 2 years ago, when he applied for college, he placed his autism front and center in his college applications, saying, yes, I'm different and I have some unique challenges, but there's also things I see about the world that other kids miss, and that will make me a better physicist. That is the idea of awareness that we need to bring to our campus. And so as we look at our success strategies on the next slide, I might note that interactions I had with a young man, Jeremy, just this week. On Monday, he posted to Facebook how he had attended his first drag show. He is a gay student. He posted this to social media, but received some negative feedback from his family, and so he pulled the post. This morning, he posted again saying, you know what, I am proud of who I am, and this is a part of my identity and something to celebrate. I had a quick conversation with him over the messenger this morning, and he gave me permission to share that change in his space. We've had conversations this week about his journey. That's the type of move that we need to see. It's being embedded into our first-year seminar courses. Concepts of respect and belonging are essential aspects of the assignments there, as well as the new approach that we're using within our Student Success Center. And we're hoping in next steps to connect this to wellness. You've asked in the last slide here for us to briefly address town-gown relationships. I would say that generally speaking, they're pretty strong in Crookston. The good news is that the folks that I talk to in town, they would like to have more interactions with our students. And I know as I speak with colleagues in other college towns, too often it's about, oh, how do we deal with these troublesome college students? That's not the case at Crookston. Of course, we can do better, and we're hoping to do that through more internships, employment, and other types of collaborative experiences. And with that, I will yield to my colleague.
Vice Chancellor Irwin.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the committee, President Gable, Provost Hanson. Thanks for the chance to share a little bit about what we're doing in Duluth. For Chancellor Lindley Black, Campus Climate was a signature initiative when he arrived in Duluth in 2010. UMD already had 4 commissions to support the work of improving campus climate. The Commission on Disabilities, the Commission on Equity, Race, and Ethnicity, the Commission for Women, and the GLBTQAI Commission. The membership of each of these commissions was and continues to be comprised of faculty, staff, and students. And to this already strong structure, Chancellor Black worked with campus climate leaders to create unit change teams to work on a welcoming and inclusive climate at a grassroots level. There are currently 16 change teams at UMD, representing many parts of the campus. Each collegiate unit has a team, as do the 4 major administrative structures. 2 student groups represent the student body. And the work of the change teams comes together in the campus climate team, a group of the change team chairs that meets monthly. The Campus Climate Leadership Team also meets monthly. It's a group of campus leaders convened by Chancellor Black to implement the recommendations that come throughout this campus climate structure. One such recommendation was our latest campus climate campaign called It's More Than That. And on the slide, you'll see one of a number of images designed to encourage and support the work of equity and inclusion on our campus. It's More Than That focuses on the complexities of ideas, concepts, and experiences, and is designed to build understanding of an individual's full story or reality. Another recent example of the work of our structure is the creation and implementation of a land acknowledgement statement for UMD. UMD has been engaged in a wide variety of campus climate assessments since 2010 when Chancellor Black arrived. Two major efforts are described in the document materials and they're represented on this slide, and more information about our comprehensive assessment work is found on our website. In the fall of 2015, UMD contracted with Rankin & Associates to conduct a comprehensive campus climate assessment that included students, faculty, and staff. Rankin & Associates presented the results to the campus in the fall of 2016, and the major findings are shared in your docket materials. Following an analysis of both the quantitative and qualitative results from the survey, as well as an extensive series of campus conversations with many constituents, the Campus Climate Leadership Team identified the 3 action items you see on the screen: make UMD more diverse, make UMD more inclusive, and work on anti-bullying stability. Unit change teams, commissions, and all administrative units were charged then with developing action plans to address one or more of these areas of focus. The action plans included objectives, action steps, and maybe most importantly, strategies for measuring progress. 37 plans were created, and a couple of examples that I'd like to share with you. The Catherine A. Martin Library Plan was to implement the Association of College and Research Library Diversity Standards, which addresses making UMD more inclusive. The Division of Student Life, my division plan, was to implement new strategies to recruit a diverse workforce, which is to make UMD more diverse. And finally, the Division of Academic Affairs plan was to create a campaign to reduce barriers to reporting campus climate issues, to work on anti-bullying and civility. Work on these 37 plans continue, and we expect progress reports this spring of 2020. A second major initiative to assess campus climate is found in the way we track campus climate incidents. The work is done by another one of our action teams, the Campus Climate Response Team. Reporting to the Campus Climate Leadership Team, the response team is tasked with designing responses to major campus incidents and also with tracking campus climate incident reports. The response team reviews the types and frequencies of campus climate incidents annually and makes recommendations to the leadership to address trends identified. In recent years, the response team work has aligned with 3 areas of focus, and examples are found in your docket. The next major step for UMD in terms of campus climate assessment is to identify a follow-up project to the Rankin survey, and we hope to work with Michael Go, our Vice President Go, on this effort. UMD has an excellent relationship and strong ties with the broader Duluth community. This too has been an area of focus for our chancellor and the senior leadership team. Faculty, staff, students, and administrators have a wide variety of relationships with the Duluth businesses, boards, and governmental agencies, and these serve UMD, our students, and the community very well. Our UMD Police Department relationship with the Duluth Police Department is remarkable in my experience in higher education. The relationship between the 2 agencies is excellent and supports safety not only on campus but in the surrounding neighborhoods. UMD also works with campus neighbors and students to improve the conditions in the neighborhoods for all residents. The photo you have on this slide is from one such initiative during move-in day this past fall. We recently held our 30th annual neighborhood meeting where we had the opportunity to update our neighbors on a number of topics as well as to enter into a productive dialogue about our shared interests. And I'd like to close with the help of my new friend Skeeter with a brief video that promotes a part of the It's More Than That campaign that we hope will have a broad impact not only at UMD but far beyond.
Welcome to It's More Than That.
It's trust. It's the state and the university saying, here's our state's greatest asset, and we're going to trust this board to take care of it. I don't take that lightly.
Yeah, I hear that. It's More Than That is a podcast by the University of Minnesota Duluth. I'm Paula Peterson. Often we don't understand the full story of someone's reality. Join me as we explore the complexities of the human experience. This week on the show, Mike Kinyanya.
And with apologies to Regent Kinyanya, that's my report. I sprung that on him.
I'm concerned about the lack of guests you must have up on the roof. So are we ready for Vice Chancellor Olson-Loy? Is that, or is, because you said you were concluding, okay, Vice Chancellor Olson-Loy.
Good morning, Chair Anderson, Provost Hanson, President Gable, members of the committee. I'm very happy to talk with you today regarding our work to foster a campus climate at the University of Minnesota Morris, where all students are welcomed, where we connect respectfully across difference, and where our graduates develop the skills and understanding that they need to live and to lead in a diverse and interconnected world. Our campus assembly last spring endorsed a new vision statement, which envisions in part that our diverse community will inspire and equip students to connect their passions to meaningful futures. Undergirding our vision are a set of 8 aspirational statements that will guide us. Among them, that we create a democratic community committed to open communication, where students, faculty, staff, and local community members from all backgrounds are empowered to contribute to the decisions, infrastructure, and liberal arts education on our campus. This aspirational statement dedicates our campus to building the capacity for respectful communication across differences, fundamental to any healthy campus climate. We have campus climate data from two sources, 2 primary quantitative data sources. The first, which you see summarized on your slide and in your docket, is from the National Survey of Student Engagement, NSE. They have an optional inclusiveness and engagement with diversity module, which we did on our campus in spring of 2017 for our first year and senior students. We are happy to note that our University of Minnesota Morris seniors report greater inclusiveness and engagement with diversity than their peers at other institutions. They were significantly more likely to report that their university, our campus, as you see, demonstrates a commitment to diversity, creates an overall sense of community among students, ensures that they are not stigmatized because of their identity, takes allegations of discrimination or harassment seriously, and provides a supportive environment for students within many various forms of diversity. The second survey is completed by students who live on campus each spring and contains questions about their experience with residents who they view as different from themselves. They're asked to what degree their on-campus housing experiences help them, first, to interact with residents who are different from themselves, and the survey notes in terms of race, gender, and beliefs, for example, and secondly, to benefit from those interactions. While this continues to be an area of work and focus for us, we are happy to see increases in student responses to each of these questions from 2018 to 2019, as you can see in your docket. And we're very happy to see that our results are well above other baccalaureate liberal arts and sciences institutions who share our Carnegie classification, as well as institutions overall. 95% of our first-year students live on campus, and about half of our student population does overall. And we know that living and learning in a diverse community is really critical to and key to building understanding, respect, and positive mutual regard. In addition to these surveys, we monitor campus climate issues throughout the year and address opportunities as they arise. Your docket materials reference changes to our campus leadership structures and our shared governance processes to enhance our capacities to ensure an inclusive and respectful campus. And 2 recent efforts are highlighted on the next slide. We gathered this fall for a series of informal conversation on the topics that you see listed on the slide on our campus, from our leadership and sustainability to creating an accessible and inviting campus, to our mission, our engagement with the region and state, and our opportunities for talking and connecting across difference. Another initiative, which is highlighted on the right, we also created a web portal to solicit suggestions from internal constituents, from alumni and friends, on how we best honor the rights of all members of our community to live, learn, and work here safely and to express themselves freely. As you know, areas that sometimes come into conflict in the work around campus climate. Our final slide celebrates and brings to life some of our town-gown relationships across our rural prairie home. On the far left, you'll see the Morris Area Farmers Market, which has been revitalized through the Morris Healthy Eating Partnership, led by our staff, students, and community partners, including the Minnesota Statewide Health Improvement Partnership, better known as SHIP. The market has moved to the Morris Public Library Square and is increasing all of our access to fresh local foods. The market's new youth cooking and learning opportunities pictured on the bottom left were celebrated in an all-University of Minnesota system news story this fall. The second photo on the top features the president of the Dakota Bank in Morris and one of our college students cooking one of our free community meals, which draw 200 plus citizens of all ages from across Morris to share dinner together each month. The next two photos show new students from our summer bridge programs this summer working with local children at the Stevens County Fair. The children are capturing their favorite things and what they love about living in Morris and in Stevens County in their artwork. And then the other slide on the bottom right shows during our campus Labor Day of service, each of those children's paintings were assembled into a mural, which now hangs in downtown Morris. And finally, the photo in the upper right highlights the Morris model. Our Vice Chancellor for Finance and Facilities, Brian Herman, is on the right with the Morris City Mayor, a Morris business leader and school board member, one of Otter Tail Power's vice presidents, and the mayor of Saarbrück, Germany, and his colleagues during a recent trip to Germany, where thanks to the Climate Smart Municipalities initiative and partnership led by the University of Minnesota's Institute on the Environment, we are learning together and advancing our shared leadership around clean energy production, energy conservation, and community resiliency. I look forward to further discussion with the committee, and I'm happy to turn things over to my colleague from Rochester.
All right, Vice Chancellor Williams, correct?
Yes.
You go ahead, sir.
Yes. Well, good morning, Chair Anderson, members of the committee, student representatives as well, President Gable and Provost Hanson. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning to talk about campus climate at the University of Minnesota, Rochester. I've been in my position as Assistant Vice Chancellor for just over 5 months. Remain very appreciative of the opportunity to be part of the University of Minnesota System Campus, which is inspiring, preparing undergraduate students as well as graduate students to address some of the grand health challenges of the 21st century. I'm very happy to be here again to share with you some of what I've been learning about our campus climate, coming in with fresh eyes, and a longtime member of the University of Minnesota system. From its inception, the University of Minnesota Rochester has been deeply embedded in the thriving city that has invested in us in many ways, including a city sales tax. One of our really distinctive strengths as an institution is our sustained and authentic relationships with a diverse set of our community partners, including, of course, the Mayo Clinic. Through these collaborations, our very diverse student population has had the opportunity to get proximate to the professionals who are working on exciting life science discoveries and healthcare innovations. Throughout UMR's history, the work of fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion has been ongoing, robust, and crucial. I think through our successful efforts in advancing inclusive excellence, UMR has proudly positioned itself as an influenced leader in the transformation of higher education and also in diversifying our healthcare workforce. And I think this trajectory of diversifying our healthcare workforce is really critical if we're going to ever address some of the enduring and savage health disparities that characterize our society. Now, University of Minnesota's founding chancellor, Dr. Stephen Lemkool, established a campus-wide diversity and inclusion committee as among his first tasks. That continues to be the campus entity, which is really the driving force behind our equity-minded efforts to create a campus climate where all students feel welcome, valued, and safe. In particular, it's been our Diversity and Inclusion Committee, which has led our biennial campus climate assessments. If you look at our survey data, which has been made available to you, both our 2016 and 2018 campus climate assessments highlight both our successes as well as some of the defining work that's out in front of us. Across both survey years, a majority of our faculty, staff, and student survey respondents affirm that a diverse campus both improves the educational reputation and experiences of our students. Second, respondents affirm that UMR has a strong foundation in relation to diversity and equity. And we also find significant numbers or a high percentage of our students, faculty, and staff respondents are comfortable with our campus climate. Though not surprisingly, students from historically underrepresented backgrounds, staff, and faculty from historically underrepresented backgrounds self-report experiencing less comfort with the overall campus climate than did their peers. Faculty, staff, and students with underrepresented identities also more commonly felt deliberately excluded and were much more likely to perceive that the campus was not placing adequate emphasis on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. For those students who actually did experience bias, They felt excluded, not welcome, discriminated against, most commonly by other students, and the exclusion most commonly occurred in the residential units as well as in the classroom. Some faculty and staff as well as students, do report experiencing exclusion and discrimination based upon their gender identity and gender expression. Students also largely agree that our UMR curriculum provides adequate opportunities to learn about local and global diversity and also exposes them to a diversity of intellectual traditions, diverse ways of knowing, as well as diverse political perspectives. At the institutional leadership level, the chancellor and other senior administrators are perceived by a very high percentage of our campus community as providing effective leadership to promote diversity and equity. As well as our campus climate assessment, UMR leadership has been committed to offering ongoing intercultural coaching to our students. We've also been deeply invested in supporting the professional development of faculty and staff in terms of their capacity to work with increasingly a diverse student population. And we also are very intentional about providing ongoing opportunities for all faculty, staff, and students to engage in meaningful dialogue about some of the most salient diversity and equity issues of our moment. As part of their undergraduate experience, our health science students all take the intercultural development inventory, which you've heard referred to earlier in our presentations. Our students take that both in their first year, their sophomore year, again in their senior year. The associated intercultural work that our UMR faculty and staff do with those students not only prepares them to lead, serve, and collaborate with others from diverse backgrounds, but we believe also fuels the types of empathy, cultural attentiveness, equity-mindedness, and conversations across difference that really characterize a positive, intercultural, and transformative campus climate. Overall, we believe that our success in sustaining equitable educational outcomes and student well-being is intimately connected to our success in creating a welcoming, supportive, and positive campus climate infused with a radical ethic of care for our students, staff, and faculty. I'd like to move toward closure with a quote from one of our first-year students. And this quote from a student, this quote comes from a letter that was given to me just within the last week. And it was a letter that came without a request for a recommendation or any other request. It was just a note that the student wanted to share with me. And I think it really speaks to the texture of our campus climate, especially for our students from historically underrepresented backgrounds. She writes, "Andrew, I'm grateful to have staff here at UMR that are always looking for ways to close the chasm of differences that separate groups of people. You created an environment safe for conversation and diversity. I felt welcome and safe to share anything with the group. I don't know that I would be thriving right now in college if it wasn't for living on purpose and the beautiful community it created." The reference to living on purpose is a reference to our first-year seminar that begins during our summer bridge program. The student goes on to write, "I'm also very thankful for our intercultural development inventory meeting. Soon after our meeting, I called my mom, and I thanked her for raising me the way she did and sacrificing so much for my success. I got to share with you some things I haven't really thought of before. It made me feel grateful to be part of a community that celebrates cultural differences instead of one that suppresses them like they were in my hometown." Like our country, many of our college campuses remain deeply divided along our nation's political and cultural fault lines. As Vice President Ghost suggested earlier in his comments, our efforts to cultivate inclusive campus climates characterized by open and civil discourse have only been more complicated, become more difficult because of the intensified anger, distrust, pain, and social tensions that characterize our current historical moment. There is much work to do in front of us, obviously, and there will certainly be setbacks along the way. But I'm confident with the bold leadership of our chancellor, our faculty, staff, and students, that UMR will continue to build its capacity to enable people, whatever their identity, whatever their background, whatever their institutional position, to thrive, to realize their capabilities, to engage meaningfully in our institutional life, and contribute to the flourishing of others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panel. Good presentation. We do have some time for questions. Regent Simonson has asked a Professor.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. I strongly support this. I think it's really great that what you're doing and this effort on equity and diversity and educating people about that. I do have one question. I think it's appropriate. Looking at the UMD, the 3 themes that you presented, I like that as well. But the thought came to my mind, how do we connect that or balance that with First Amendment rights?
I think he's asking you to, Vice Chancellor Irwin, do you want to answer that?
So I think at UMD, we're really, thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Chair Simonson. At UMD, we're really trying to be inclusive in the truest sense of the word, not to try to prevent speaking or different viewpoints, but to create the situation and the opportunities for students to come together with respect and understanding to learn from one another. So we've had a great emphasis on the First Amendment in our Kirby Student Center, who works with student organizations across campus. Our director has become somewhat expert in the First Amendment, and it works with student organizations of all kinds of beliefs and ideologies and thoughts to make sure that those kinds of conversations happen. Thank you.
Okay, Regent Powell.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Anderson. I want to echo Regent Simonson's comment. I think this is really important work. Thanks to all of you. And it is important that we regularly assess, the climate on the campus and how students are feeling about the experience. I mean, they and their families are paying, it's a lot of money. It's a huge commitment. And so we really need to know, how they're feeling. I was struck by how much variation there is, across campus, just in terms of the narrative and the storytelling and the anecdotes, which are very powerful, but also I'll speak for myself. I find it very difficult to really have a feeling from campus to campus how we're doing, and where the opportunities and the challenges really lie. And so, I guess to get to my point, Vice President Go, you opened this up by commenting on whether there's a common set of metrics and a common tool that we could use to assess this. I wholeheartedly support that. I think that it's imperative that we develop, there are a lot of people, as you know, that do this. They're really good questionnaires. They really get to the issues. We can use the responses to compare across campuses. We can compare to institutions across the country. And I just think that we need to do that. And along with that, the response rate that we have to the current tools that we're using, 25%, to me, it's really low. I mean, worryingly low. And it's pretty thin. And so as we develop, a tool that we can use that's common, we got to get the numbers up. We got to hear from more students, or I think we'll be concerned about the validity of the data. So thanks to you all.
Okay, I don't think there was a real question in that.
That was a comment.
That's what I thought. Okay. So I'm going to move on to my next one, Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not being on campus for a long time now, on a daily basis as a student. It's the world has changed so dramatically, and we could have a retreat on this topic, I think, and spend several days exploring all the different complexities of all of this. And I think about one of the things that's different for me is I know that this was part of student life, but it's obviously a much bigger part of the conversation today than it would have been 20-some years ago. And as I try to process this and understand the world today versus the past, I always come back to what is our expectation as a student, or what our expectation as an institution for what we're supposed to be providing. Is it because at one point in time you went to school, you took the classes, and you went home, because most people lived at home, and you got some type of training that maybe was more vocational. Sometimes, obviously the liberal arts component to it. Whereas now it's a much more holistic experience. We cover your health care, and we've got obviously workout facilities and things like that. It's much more comprehensive than it used to be, and so I ask, I come back and I start thinking about, well, what's that balance between establishing an environment, and talking about Rochester in particular, I thought that was very interesting when you talked about this letter that you'd received, and the young person referred to the hometown. And I'm sitting here thinking about what's the balance between ensuring that the students are getting the skills, the resilience necessary to go out into a world that's not going to be quite as nurturing perhaps as the university experience, balanced with what do they take from this experience to help them go back and help their hometown become a more, sort of welcoming and understanding environment of all beliefs and views and everything else. And so I'm just really, amazed at what's going on in the world right now. And I think about the conversation about the young person who posted about going to a drag show. And the reaction, obviously that was somewhat of an extracurricular conversation, because I think you'd indicated that it was family members that had responded, and how we are really working on those issues. But you have other students, that would have, maybe somebody posts something about their religious faith and they get people that will mock them and talk, your fairy tales in the sky type thing or whatever. I don't know that would necessarily have been part of the sort of the curricular conversation of the college experience, and just kind of thinking through how do we provide this resilience for our students in a world that none of us could have imagined when we were growing up. The internet and the communication, because really so much of this bullying is an online thing. You used to go home to your apartment or your house or your farm after school. Well, now it's like the whole world. We're all living around a town square, and everyone's been given a ski mask, so you can say anything, with impunity. And how do we kind of help our students in a world that none of us lived in and none of us could really see? I think the task that you have in being able to not only create an environment that's good, strengthen the students so that they will survive once college is over and the world changes quite a bit, but at the same time, addressing these concerns that they have and issues that may be an impediment to them getting an education. I would follow that one last thing, and I don't know to what extent this really applies to what you're addressing today, but even just the cost of attendance, because there's a cost to all of these things, and when we make these investments, is finding that balance, because one thing we know is the cost affects everybody. In fact, to some extent, it affects some of the underrepresented groups, and the fact that the majority of our students are female, it has more of an impact on women than it does even on men at this point. And being able to find that balance as well, that we put resources into things, but ultimately it has an impact on what's going to happen to people long after they're out of school. So it's a bit more of a comment. I'm certainly interested in what you'd have to say about the changing world and how we're not just addressing the world today, but what we imagine it's going to be in the coming years. Be happy to have any input from any of you on that topic.
Chair Anderson, Regent Rocha, thank you for your comments. And I might connect this back to the prior comment from Regent Powell. We have part of the strength of one state and 5 strong campuses is that these campuses are quite different. The common assessment across 5 campuses will be tricky because of the unique character of the institutions. I would also say, though, that one of the things I think I can speak with confidence is there is a common commitment to grounding our education in the liberal arts, albeit in different ways, that a core commitment there is preparing students for citizenship. And that's not just for today, but it is for the future. It is recognizing those types of trends and these types of connections of in the class and outside of the class that our somewhat smaller institutions thrive upon, I think sets our students up. It facilitates the types of engagement where we can have more speech and engage in conversations about making that speech more respectful, more inclusive of all identities, not just narrow sets, but all identities. You cited religious identities. That's an important part of this as well, and that's part of the shared goal that we are working through that space.
Thank you. Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. So I have some comments and I have some questions, but I'll get to the question first. So who has the best climate? What campus has the best climate and why?
It'll be a competition.
That was a serious question. So
Regent Anderson, I'm sorry, Chair Anderson and Regent Hsu, I might state that that is, again, perhaps a comparison of apples and blue. I think Crookston has an amazing campus climate. We've had some unique challenges this week with the announcement around our football program, and I have been so deeply impressed with, even with the conversation I just had with our student representative, Alora DeMuth, about how students have responded with character. I know that there are similar challenges at the Duluth campus in different spaces. Each of us would probably arm wrestle on that one. We all have challenges, but in unique ways, we are contributing to the overall mission of the University of Minnesota system.
I think the fair answer to that question, quite frankly, Regents, is you all are doing things that you think can help, but we all have challenges. We've said that the rating should all be higher at all of our campuses. So I think each one is probably uniquely doing something to try to raise that rating. Is that a fair statement? Ms. Loy.
Chair Anderson and Regent Chu, I jokingly, when you said who has the best climate, says we do. And I think we likely all believe that we have a great climate on our campuses and know the work that we're doing to increase those rates and to do even better. As we look to do some kind of assessment that would let us look more comparably at data across each of the institutions, like you're able to do with the College Student Health Survey, which Boynton implements for all of us and for other institutions in the state. It's really helpful when the data, like that data, is normed across the whole state of Minnesota. We're going to want data that's nationally normed. That's one of the benefits, I think, of the National Survey of Student Engagement and also the educational benchmarking study, that we know this is really hard work everywhere, and we all know that we could do better on a variety of different pieces within it. It was also really helpful for us to see where we are exceeding what's happening at other institutions and to know which of those areas are more challenging across the country and with our institutional peer groups, like for us, the Carnegie Classification of Liberal Arts and Sciences institutions. We also can break down the data, as you've seen in some of our presentations, and we have that for Morris too, by different racial and ethnic populations, by other populations, by gender, by age in school, and other things as well. So we can give you more robust answers to that as we work to gather more information systematically together.
So, to no surprise, there's a lot of interest in this topic. I virtually have every regent that wants to still ask questions. So we're going to try to do that. We're going to skip our break, and we're going to have the regents ask the questions if they can very briefly, and maybe briefer answers, and we can get through everybody. Regent Chu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. The reason I asked that question is because, yes, you all have challenges, and Regent Powell had suggested that we have a common metric, which we talked about in the past. We still haven't gotten one. I just looked up, we're spending, in terms of equity and diversity, our budget is $14 million a year. That doesn't include probably all of your campus budgets that you're putting onto it. So I would like to see a presentation that actually shows us, how much we're spending and what we're getting for the money that we're spending on those campuses. And I think that will help us understand, who's making progress and who isn't, and maybe share some ideas. And I know you share ideas every day, but you don't share ideas knowing that you're definitely getting benefits from certain things versus the other. It's all kind of subjective as far as I can tell right now. And I think, I thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I thank you for sharing the personal stories. I think those are all great. I'll just share my personal story. One of the things that, one of the big benefits that I think I learned at the University of Minnesota was being treated as kind of a number and being anonymous and having to negotiate through the system basically on my own. And I think a lot of kids who graduated in the 1980s said that. And I look back at my peers from high school who went to private schools like St. Olaf, Carleton, some of those other ones. They didn't get the same thing. They were coddled a little bit more than we were here at the U. And I think the benefits actually were probably better for us kids at the U, because we had to learn to live in the real world, basically, and maybe in a world that's harsher than the real world in some ways. But I think that there's actually some learning that comes from that you don't get at a private school. So just leave it.
Regent Chu, I think you bring up a very good point, and I think that could be a discussion for another day. I think it's a terrific point. It's a terrific point. We're going to go to Regent Sviggum.
from the coddled one.
Yeah, same old, there we go.
Maybe not when you were there.
If I don't ask a question, do I vote for a break, or Mr. Chairman, or not?
I don't think we're gonna get a break either way, so.
Well, then I'm going to bore you then. And not a question, presenters, very, very good. Not a question, just a comment to take to heart. And I would disrespect myself if I didn't make the comment. If you remember back ago when you presented this, I think in October, and I looked at your statistics, and I was really, really concerned about the group being political affiliations and conservatives, and how significantly low the number was. 13% and 24% felt respected on their, well, this was the Twin City campus, I think, Dr. Gold. And I can only imagine, fellow Regents, if it had been some other group on this list, of which there's 7, what a topsy-turvy, upside-down world it would be 2 months later, what changes we would have made. So I looked to the other campuses, and I also noticed that at Morris, for instance, on page 36, I see that the lowest ranking for a respected group, or a group that felt part of the community, was for political orientations. The lowest number rating, as well as much lower than the NSSE, is that what it's called? NSSE average. At Duluth, I saw there was a survey in 2015. I didn't get to see the questions. I don't think the questions were here, so I don't even, maybe they were here in an appendix, but I didn't see them. Needless to say, I don't know if political orientation was asked or not, or even of a question. It maybe was. I didn't see the results, but I do notice in your campus climate change team, on your change team, you have a number of different groups on the change team, which I expect should be there and anticipate should be there, but nothing relating to political orientation or values or anything like that that might, should maybe also be on that team. And no question, just to all of you, understand that there is a concern that all need to feel inclusive and respected. All. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Spigum. Regent Kenyana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my primary concern is about how we approve this presentation material, but that's the video. I don't know how that snuck in there, but I digress. Vice President Go started by discussing, or just mentioning how hard assessment is, and I think we've heard that in the comments from Regent Hsu, from Chair Powell, and so forth. And my question is kind of towards that. I saw it wasn't spoken about, but in the report, we saw about harassment, and specifically sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. And the reporting has skyrocketed, in some ways 150%, other places 300%. And I'm correct in that we celebrate that as the success of the programs to encourage survivors to report. And that's typically how that's viewed. So on one hand, obviously, thank you all and your colleagues for all the work you've done, and that, we're creating an environment where survivors are more comfortable reporting. But then how, at some point, if that number is rising, it's going to cross over from, it's not just increased reporting, it's increased incidents, right? Is there a way to figure that out? And then the second part of that question is, how do we now shift the focus from encouraging reporting to, now trying to stop, which I know it's already happening, but I just want to hear more about that, how that, what the next part of that is.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor Irwin.
Chair Anderson, Regent Kenyanya. So to me, it's a both and argument. Prevention is equally important as encouraging reporting. And it's those prevention efforts that we have to continue to work at and change and update, given our students and the feedback they give us about what's effective. So in terms of where the line crosses over, it's a societal problem that it's one of the most underrepresented crimes and issues that our society faces. So I'm not sure that we're ever going to be able to get at the question is, what are we missing or who's not coming forward? But I do think that we have to continue our efforts in prevention in order to get at both sides of the problem, which is preventing it from happening and then addressing it effectively when it does.
Vice Chancellor Olson-Lloyd, do you want to add something?
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson and Regent Kenyanya. I think we do have some data also that helps reflect what Vice Chancellor Irwin is speaking to. If you look at the College Student Health Survey, which is one of the good system-wide data sources that we have, it asks about incidents with sexual harassment and sexual violence, and then it also asks whether people have reported it or not. So we can track the incidence rates in terms of what people are reporting, and then we can also see whether the percentage of people who are making reports are going up. So that's one of the things we look at to kind of triangulate that increase in reporting that we're seeing with whether there's actually an increase in behavior or whether behavior is decreasing.
So some of the data is there, we just have to know where to look. Thank you. Regent Hur.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation, and I'm really happy that you've got good plans and that you're tracking progress. But my question comes from, you can have, say, 90% great climate, but it only takes one incident to totally undo everything that you've done. So I've been wondering, you didn't talk much about it, but I would like to know, do you have a plan, and are staff trained at crisis management in that if there is an incident, are you responding effectively? Because how you respond will make the difference to bring back that the climate that you created.
I think it'll be brief answers, but each college, do you have a crisis plan in place?
Putting in place.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a response team.
Yes, I do as well. At Morrison are also working to strengthen it around these particular issues.
Yes, we have a diverse response team, including faculty and staff.
Terrific, terrific. I especially, and Dr. Go was saying campus here we do, okay. Regent Mayron.
Again, to the presenters, and thank you, Regent Anderson. I just want to echo the comments that Regent Powell made to this regard. I understand that common measurements may be difficult between and among the campuses because you all are different and we celebrate those differences. But I also think it's worth trying and continuing, because if anything, what they will lead to hopefully is identifying best practices that can be superimposed onto other campuses to assist them with their climate issues. So I think it's not only finding the information so we can compare, but then with that information, find the best practices that those studies reveal to use campus-wide, system-wide. So I just want to play off that piece from Regent Powell.
Anything else you'd like to comment on? We have Regent Powell down for questions, but he left the room, so he must not want to ask. Go ahead one time.
Chair Anderson, thank you. Just a couple of brief comments. Regent Hsu, we do program level assessment to assess our efforts and whether our programs are affected, and could share some of that with you. And then I also wanted to share that with Regent Sviggum that the results from the survey were over 200 pages long, our report, and I was discouraged from attaching that to your docket for good reasons, but be happy to share a link with you so that you could dive further into what we learned from the survey.
I would appreciate that.
Thank you all for today, and thank you all for your work for the University of Minnesota. Thank you. We're going to have our next presenter in just a moment. That's going to be Dean Durgan and Madison Mueller, graduate student. Hello, Dean. And Ms. Mueller must be to the left, my left there. Thank you. Okay, we're going to hear a little bit about the extension and 4-H undergraduate enrollment pipelines. And I am anxiously awaiting and want to listen to this report. So, Dean Durgan, if you want to start whenever you're ready.
Good. Good morning, Chair Anderson and members of the board, Provost Hanson and President Gable. It's a pleasure for me to be here today to discuss the role of extension in supporting recruitment and admissions to the University of Minnesota. First, I would just like to talk a little bit about Extension. I think many of you know Extension, that we are located throughout the state in our 15 regional offices and offices in all 87 counties. About 67% of all of our faculty and staff live outside the Twin Cities area, so living out in the state and in the communities. Extension is organized into 4 major centers, and I will talk about today not only 4-H and youth development, but our other centers and the work that we're doing with youth preparedness for college. Our centers are the Center for Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources, our Center for Family Development, Center for Community Vitality, and then, of course, our Center for 4-H and Youth Development. I'll talk quite a bit today. It was asked by Regent Anderson to talk about 4-H. And so 4-H, for those of you that are not familiar with 4-H, is that 4-H is the largest youth-serving organization in the state with over 65,000 members involved in 4-H programs, and that is in 4-H clubs or other 4-H activities. 4-H is an after-school, hands-on learning program for youth from 5 to 19 in Minnesota. And youth can join 4-H by joining a club or being part of activities, after-school activities. Our club experiences are led by adult volunteers and also by the youth themselves. And then they use curriculum that is developed by our extension faculty and staff. Our 4-Hers this is a program, as we said, a hands-on experience where 4-Hers really get to decide what they want to do. They can choose from hundreds of different projects from photography to agriculture to performing arts to civic engagement, healthy living. If a 4-Her has an interest in a project, they can find a leader in a club to be able to share that interest. Recently, University of Minnesota Extension participated in a national study that was conducted by Tufts University to look at the impact of being a part of 4-H and the academic achievement of that 4-H member. And what the Tufts study showed is that 4-H members are more likely to pursue higher education than students that are not non-4-H members. And also that girls that were in 4-H are more than twice as likely to go on to higher education and also to major in a STEM discipline. And so 4-H does have an impact on the academic achievement and goals for our 4-H members. We also know from our studies here in Minnesota that of the 4-Hers that report to us, at least 70% of them graduate from high school and go on to a 4-year institution. So one of our goals is to make sure that in 4-H is that we are challenging our 4-H members and so that they have aspirations for higher education. So today I have really am proud to have Madison with us here today. Madison is a 4-H alumni. She is also a current student here at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, and she is soon to be an alumni of the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. She will be graduating this semester, and she was gracious enough to take time out of her studying today for her finals to talk a little bit about her experience in 4-H. She was one of our state ambassadors, was in 4-H for a long time, and how 4-H led her here to the University of Minnesota. So Madison, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Good morning, Chairman Anderson, members of the committee, President Gable, and Provost Hanson. It is with such excitement that I'm here today to share my story and experience in an organization that really had such a key role in building who I am today, especially in my journey coming to the University of Minnesota. My start in 4-H started in small town Hallock, Minnesota, my hometown in the northwest corner of the state. There I grew up on my family's farm and continued my family's tradition of joining 4-H at a young age. I started in kindergarten and became a Clover Bud, the youngest member you can be in 4-H. As time went on and my experience in my club level really flourished, I was taking many projects to the county fair in hopes of going to the state fair. I was getting really involved in my club's leaders council, as well as attending all of my club meetings and other activities. That's when my mom decided she wanted to work in our extension office at the county level as our support staff. Before I knew it, I was signed up for everything 4-H had to offer at the county and regional level. I got more involved on my county's leadership board, serving as a representative there. I attended regional conferences, and my mom, she chaperoned everything I went to. My first regional conference, Building Leadership and Understanding, or BLUE as it's known, I was introduced to a team of 4-Hers that were slightly older than me, all wearing green shirts that matched, and those were the state 4-H ambassadors. And I was my interest was piqued by what they were doing at that conference. At that point, I was already serving as a county ambassador, my county's vice president, as well as my club's president. I figured out that I really enjoyed my leadership experiences, and 4-H gave me a great space to expand and space to do more than what I wanted. I learned more about the State Ambassador Program as time went on, and I soon found myself applying. The State Ambassador Program is a group of 20 to 25 4-Hers older than the 10th grade, and they get together from across the state of Minnesota to plan and facilitate those regional conferences as well as a statewide conference in the summer. I applied and found myself serving as a 2014 to 2015 state ambassador, and later on the leadership team of that group, leading the next group of state ambassadors in my second term. The state ambassadors introduced me to the University of Minnesota campus as their activities as well as opportunities to study here, with a lot of our trainings and programming happening here on campus. And I have to credit 4-H for much of the opportunities presented in my life this far, such as applying and being accepted to the University of Minnesota, being the first in my family to attend a 4-year university and receive a degree. My confidence to attend such a large school that differed very much from my graduating high school class of 18 students, and the comfort of moving 6 hours from home. The early opportunity to explore agriculture in a way that would soon lead me to studying agricultural communications and marketing and earn my degree in that. Join a sorority that values agriculture and has strong ties to 4-H, as well as holding leadership positions in that sorority as well as other clubs here on campus. 4-H also offered me a part-time position in the state office here on campus that gave me applicable skills and helped me grow professionally as well, helping me land a full-time job after I graduate this semester with Minnesota Farm Bureau. I hope you can all understand the impact that this program has had on me, and I truly believe that without 4-H, I wouldn't be the leader or person I am today, nor would I be here at the University of Minnesota. Thank you.
So, do you have more to present, Dean Durgan, or is this?
I do have more to present, but if you
Well, I
would.
was just going to say,
Chair Anderson,
I was just
sorry.
going to say to Madison, congratulations. I'm a huge backer of 4-H, and my children like to tell me that I'm a wealth of worthless knowledge. So, Hallock students go to Kitson County, the Bearcats.
That's
the
correct.
Bearcats, and I think I'm right on this. The most famous thing about Hallock, Minnesota, people don't understand, is where the movie Fargo was filmed.
That is also correct.
So it really wasn't in North Dakota, it was in Hallock. So Dean Durgan, okay, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Chair Anderson. And also, Madison didn't say that she was also accepted at North Dakota State University and had to choose between those two universities, and she chose us. So we are very happy that she did that. So thank you. And Madison will be here and will stay through the presentation for questions. As I mentioned, we have 4 centers at the University of Minnesota Extension, but one of the largest is our 4-H and Youth Development Program. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the programs we have within 4-H that encourages and helps to really help our youth, our 4-H youth, think about their career past high school. So the first is the immersion programs at University of Minnesota campuses. So these immersion programs go anywhere from 1 day on campus to several days on campus. The several days on campus includes staying at the dorm, eating at the cafeteria, being part of campus life, meeting with other students, being able to meet with faculty, and being able to explore careers and majors within the university. Most of these 4-Hers that we bring on campus would be first-year college students, so they really have not had the experience to be part of a campus and to really feel like that they can come to campus and succeed in campus. As Madison said, she lives in Hallock, Minnesota, where, as she will probably say, you can see Canada from her front door. So coming down to the University of Minnesota is not something she would probably have done if she had not been in 4-H. So bringing our 4-Hers on campus to really find a sense that they can succeed on campus is important. And last year we had about 250 4-Hers come to a campus immersion program, and we had them on the Twin Cities campus, on the Rochester campus, and also on the Morris campus. One thing that we have found about our campus immersion programs is that they are costly to bring students on campus, and also to have chaperones with them. So we were very excited when we have just learned that we received a federal grant from a program that's called SciFAR, the Children, Youth, and Family at Risk program, for $640,000 to continue our work with Somali American youth here in the Twin Cities and also in Moorhead. And part of that grant will be a campus immersion program here on the Twin Cities campus, but also in partnership with the Crookston campus. So we're very excited about receiving that funding and being able to continue that work, again, with first-generation college students. 4-H has many offerings, programs in the STEM disciplines that our 4-Hers can be part of. We have newer programs that we've developed to really look at some of our older 4-Hers, to challenge them to stay in 4-H and also to get them to be thinking about careers and going to college in the STEM discipline. One of those programs is the Science of Ag program, where we developed a program where teams of 4-Hers can work together on an issue or a problem in agriculture. Those 4-Hers form their own teams. They can be within their same 4-H club or outside of their 4-H club. In fact, we've had teams that comes from various counties. So these 4-Hers come together to look at an issue. They work with a coach and a mentor, and then come together on campus. This year we had the meeting at the Carlson School of Entrepreneurs. That they sponsored this program. They present their project, they present their solution, and at the end of the day that many of them are eligible for scholarships then to come to the university or a campus of their choice. We also have many of our partners that are very concerned about where the future science in agriculture, our agricultural scientists, where are they going to come from? And so we've had funding, a very generous gift from the Minnesota Corn Growers Association to support our Science of Agriculture program, also to renovate and update our agronomy and plant science program. So we are working very hard with looking for resources to continue these programs, and many of our partners are doing that. We also have STEM clubs throughout the state, many of them not only in agriculture, but in engineering, veterinary medicine. And we also have a number of STEM clubs here in the Twin Cities, again, working with our Somali American youth. And we've had, I think in the last year, about 2,500 Somali American youth working in our STEM clubs, both here in the Twin Cities and in the Moorhead area. We also have a long-going 20-year partnership with the White Earth tribe in Northwest Minnesota, and this is a program that we developed in collaboration with the tribe. It's a summer science and math program that is open to 4th to 8th graders to experience math as not something they have to do, but something that they want to do, to make it fun, to make it exciting, and also to make it culturally, to be a part of their culture. So it's, science around nature and how they can apply math and science there. So last year we had 40 students in that 4-week program at the White Earth Tribe. And this program is taught in collaboration with tribal members and also with University of Minnesota Extension faculty. In addition to our programs in 4-H, we also have a number of programs throughout Extension that also encourages going to post-secondary education and also graduating from high school. One of the first programs I'd like to talk about is a program that is called Open Doors for Higher Education. This is a program that is coming out of our Center for Family Development, and it is a program that is working with immigrant Latino families to help them make decisions on post-secondary education for their children. So many of these children will be, again, first-generation college students. This course is taught in the community, both in Spanish and in English, and working directly with families and their kids. They can be 4-Hers, some of them are not 4-Hers, to really learn about financial aid, college entrance exams, college applications, what it means to take out a college loan, what it means to apply for scholarships, bring them on campus, and then again, just helping them see themselves as going to college and helping their families feel comfortable about sending their kids to college too. So it is a program that many of these families have said that because of it, they feel much more comfortable and much more able to be thinking about their kids as college students. Another program that we have is a program that's called Education, Our Best Legacy. And this is a program that is working, again, primarily with immigrant families here in Minnesota to help them navigate the high school system, the public school system here in Minnesota. So what it takes for them to graduate from high school and also to prepare them for post-secondary, their college career. This program is taught both in Spanish and in English, and soon will be also taught in Hmong. So it's been piloted in Columbia Heights. It's also in Dodge County and in the Worthington area. And that program alone has had over 2,000 participants in that program, really thinking about how to make sure that these students are graduating from high school so they can then become college students. I think many of you know that many of our extension programs are enhanced by our volunteers in Minnesota. We have over 35,000 screened volunteers that help to work on our programs. One of our largest programs is our volunteer systems and youth development 4-H, over 15,000 volunteers in that program a year. But we also have a number of volunteers in our Master Gardener program. We have a junior Master Gardener program that is managed by our Master Gardeners and our faculty and staff that introduce youth to growing food, what that means, also about harvesting food, preparing food, and eating healthy. So it really is around, again, that science around growing food, but also their exposure. This is sometimes their first exposure to the University of Minnesota and what that means. We also have a large program in many of the schools in schoolyard gardens, and this again is ran by the Master Gardeners in collaboration with the schools, again about growing food, the science of growing food, and eating healthy. And last year we had 45,000 students participate in that program of school gardens and what that means. And again, an exposure to the University of Minnesota and what the University of Minnesota has to offer. All right, so I'd like to end in the next couple of slides to talk about, go back to 4-H again. 4-H is, we do try to track where our 4-H alumni go. We don't always, aren't always able to do that. But we do know that our 4-Hers are throughout the state. As Madison said, she's from Hallock, Minnesota, and I think most of your classmates went to NDSU, didn't they? So if they went to college. So they have lots of choices there. Of our 4-Hers that we did track last year, you could see that Twin Cities campus is one of the places that they come, but they also go to SDSU, NDSU, Bridgewater, Mankato, and also to some Wisconsin schools. One thing that we are working on is trying to have a better way of tracking some of these students. And one of the things that that we have learned is that other states do a better job of tracking their 4-Hers of where they go to school, and that many of them on their admissions forms to their universities ask whether that person was in, that youth was in 4-H, to be able to track that, because we know that we have more 4-Hers here at the University of Minnesota than we're able to track. We also know that some of the other universities are thinking about giving college credit for 4-H. Nebraska is doing that right now, is thinking about that right now, is how to give college credit to 4-Hers that completed some type of 4-H program into that university. And we do say to many of our 4-Hers as they're coming to the University of Minnesota that 4-H really is their first class at the University of Minnesota, and this is a place that they're very welcome to come to. So this is a little over 100 4-Hers that we are tracking that would answer our survey, and we're welcome to tell us where they are going. So the freshman class of those that we are tracking right now, you see that a large percent go to the Twin Cities campus, but they're also at the Duluth campus, the Crookston campus, and the Morris campus. So in conclusion, some of the opportunities and challenges that we see as Extension as we continue to support our youth in the state to challenge them to graduate high school, go on to secondary education, is that I think that there still is throughout the state not the best awareness that there can be about the opportunities on the campuses, not just the Twin City campuses, but the other system campuses. We know that last year about 73% of the 4-Hers that we did track went on to post-secondary education, but only 12% of them came to the U. And so we know they have other choices, and we need to be thinking about how to bring them here. One thing that we've heard, and Madison could talk a little bit about that too, from just her experience of coming to the U, is there is still this perception that the U is a hard place to get into, is that, it's hard, the admission standards are difficult, and that you won't be accepted, which I find interesting is because if you look at the Tufts study, is that our 4-Hers tend to be more prepared for college, they have higher standards, test scores in reading and math, and so many of them are prepared to come here. They just get a sense that they're not going to be here, that they're not going to be accepted here. The next is the welcoming campus. We've heard from many of our 4-H families and from our 4-Hers is that their tours on campus they don't feel as welcome as they do at maybe NDSU or SDSU, and that, having some way to make them feel much more welcome, I think the campus emergence programs will happen too. One is another greater collaboration that Extension, we really need to work more closely with student life and admissions here at the University of Minnesota to make sure that we are doing what we should be doing and need to be doing to get those students accepted here. And then finally, as we heard today and others, is that we are all interested in the first generation college students. We are also very interested in first generation 4-Hers. So we have started a new program to support the first generation 4-Hers. Last year we had about 6,500 new 4-Hers join the 4-H program through that first generation 4-H program, and many of them were, from our minority students, our new immigrant students, youth here in the state. And so our goal is to increase the number of our first generation 4-Hers and make sure that they are first generation U of M students. So that's what we're doing. We're very excited about that, and we're also very excited to work more closely with admissions here, and we are ready to answer your questions. So thank you very much.
Terrific presentation. It's interesting to hear that Nebraska may be giving college credit for some of these 4-H deals. I find that interesting, and Regent Davenport and I work a little bit on dual credits and stuff, and maybe that's something we have to put in our quiver and work in. So great. I'm going to ask, we got 3 regents that want to speak as of now, and we'll start with Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. Very interesting presentation. One thing maybe I missed was how many 4-Hers are there in the state?
So Regent Anderson, Regent Hsu, about 67,000 4-Hers.
Okay, so the numbers you showed us are really low then, right? Because I think you showed that first slide had about 200 kids in it where they were going to school.
Chair Anderson.
Yeah, and you might just want to comment on the ages of 4-Hers.
Right, so our 4-Hers are anywhere from 5 years old to 19 years old. And we also do not, we don't have a good way right now to track many of them after they graduate, they're alums of 4-H. And so we're working on that. But so we don't have all of those numbers, but of the ones that we're tracking, that just shows you the diverse places that they do go to college.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So then maybe you could tell me how many are college age, just so I can get some perspective, because I can divide, 75,000 by 18 or, whatever the number is, and there's still a substantial number of college age students, I think.
Regent Anderson, Regent Hsu, I can get that number for you. I right now do not know that breakdown of what that range of students.
Okay, thank you. One more. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Chair Anderson. Yeah, I'm just thinking, I think we're just scratching at the surface in terms of this opportunity, but I also want to make sure that the admissions process is welcoming to them, as well as the campuses are welcoming to them. It's just interesting how your presentation comes after our last conversation about, the inclusiveness of campuses. And if students aren't feeling welcome at the University of Minnesota, then we kind of have a problem, another problem that we didn't know we had in the last conversation. So I look forward to seeing more information about this, and I think it's a big opportunity, and hopefully we are able to offer these students what they're looking for.
Chair Anderson, Regent Hsu, I may defer to Madison on maybe, just her experience coming to the U and also with some of your colleagues.
Yes.
Ms. Buer, if you want to give us some comments?
I would love to. So coming to the University of Minnesota, again, I live 6 hours north of here, and I knew nobody coming in here, which was a little nerve-wracking, but 4-H did prepare me in a way that I was able to present myself, make friends easily. I knew those icebreakers that I could bring up in any conversation. But I think coming to the U, I did feel welcome, but I think where some things are is like I'm from a very rural community. Coming to the University of Minnesota in the middle of the Twin Cities was very alarming, very different, and just being able to adapt to those things were very difficult at first. Again, 4-H, I think, did prepare me to be able to move and change and really adapt to where I was. But I think just in a sense of being a little bit more sheltered in a rural community, if you will, just that change, that drastic change is, I think, where a lot of students do get hung up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first comment would be to Ms. Muir. Be careful, because 4-H can be a pipeline to this board. I was a proud member of the Busy Buddies 4-H Club, which is still a club active in Steele County. And my great regret from those days was that the state horse show doesn't happen during the state fair. Mm-hmm. And so, in fact, some of you know that my 38-year-old mare passed this last May. She was my 4-H horse, so I lost one of my ties. I also had projects in geology and geography, and a wide range of things, share the fun, all those kinds of activities, and but none of those skills would have gotten me to the state fair. So, and of course, I still have the pool cue holder that I made in shop, but I don't actually have a pool table, so it's not very valuable. And I'm familiar with Halleck because I think probably about the time you were born, there was the flood fight '97 for the National Guard, and so we were East Grand Forks, and we had folks up in Halleck, and your community was very helpful to the people that were affected, as was Halleck, by that flooding. So you may have heard stories about it, but I doubt that you've experienced it. And I would say that if we could, again, kind of sample, track your DNA to understand what it is that got you to come here. I know that both North Dakota and South Dakota State, you paid more to come to this campus than you would have as a Minnesota student attending those schools. They're between $3,000 and $4,000 per year less, and they're obviously, you're probably familiar. They've really kind of tracked your classmates in seeking to attract them to those schools. Do you want to make a comment to that? And then
Sure.
I've got another comment.
Chair Anderson, Regent Roche. I did notice that, and definitely in my decision, I did apply to NDSU first, and I was accepted within the same week, which is a lot different than my experience at the University of Minnesota. I think I applied in October and didn't hear back till late January. And I still left that decision till the very end because it was very difficult. As I said, I had 18 classmates, and 14 of those 18 are in the Fargo-Moorhead area attending college at MSUM or NDSU. And of the few of us, the 4 of us that were left, 2 of us decided to go elsewhere. I didn't want that same experience I had in high school to happen in college all over again. I did want to go out and meet new people. I had a great experience in 4-H doing that. And I had great mentors in 4-H, great trusted adults that really wanted to see the best of me, and it encouraged me to want to do more. And I think coming to the University of Minnesota, seeing the opportunities here and along in the Twin Cities were much greater than in the Fargo area. The tuition thing was a holdup. Thankfully, I was able to receive scholarships through my 4-H experience and different opportunities there. 4-H offers a lot of scholarships to students coming into college, as well as throughout their years in the University of Minnesota also helped me with my financial needs. But the tuition was also included. I know that a lot of students that are making that decision in 4-H, and we were talking just recently of me and my roommates, we were also all in 4-H, and they're like, everyone that we know went to SDSU, are they increasing their agricultural opportunities or what have you? But overall, I think it was a tuition decision.
Thank you. May I continue? Thank you for that. That's actually very, I think, helpful to understand because we don't always understand what those dynamics are as time changes. I would make a couple observations. One, to Dean Durgan, I think were we to have credit for 4-H experience as Nebraska, your ability to track alumni would increase dramatically as people seek to translate that experience into some level of college credit in recognition of that. I oftentimes look at something like 4-H involvement because it for most people, but not all, importantly, it's much of a family experience, right? I mean, your parents are involved, your siblings are involved, and so when you look at the metrics about the number that make their way into college and 4-year degrees, it reflects a bit of the fact that these are kids that are lucky enough to have that kind of family support, and reaching kids that don't necessarily have that obviously is a big value I think that 4-H can put forward. And I spent a couple years on the State 4-H Foundation, and which kind of bridged me from when I was a 4-H'er and on the board last time and now, and so I've kind of kept in touch a little bit. It's been amazing, the evolution of how 4-H is operating, and a number of years ago we were talking a lot about how we were really going to move 4-H to reach underrepresented communities, particularly in an urban and suburban environment, because it had been such a traditionally rural exercise. But what's interesting is the rural students are now an underrepresented group. And the fact is that this is already a nice structure that we have to reach students that we wouldn't normally have that opportunity to. And so to the extent that we can really understand how we can make investments to reach a group that has, again, moved from what was essentially the majority. I mean, 100 years ago, 90% of the population was rural. And now it's certainly underrepresented in our student population. So to the extent we can take those lessons and those resources and really reach students like Ms. Muir here, I think we serve the state very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. And since everybody is coming up with Hallock connections here, I'll start with a thank you, Madison, for your thoughtful and well-delivered remarks. Really helps bring this to life for us. But one of my all-time favorite electrical transmission engineers at Minnesota Power was a Hallock native. And he wanted me out there about every other week, but Regent Anderson won't let anyone into the 7th Congressional District, so I haven't been up there. But fun to hear from your corner of the state. Dean Durgan, I just want to highlight and thank you for this effort to track our state's evolving demographic and start to engage in the examples you gave us, Hmong and Latino communities. It's so vital that you're there. And my question for you would be, one of two questions would be, how do you track, because of course the admissions work that Vice Provost McMaster's team does, and of course on all our other campus, always looking at demographics, but is there some connections you make with them? Because it feels like you're on the front leading edge of some of this stuff, and so kudos for doing it. But number two, how connected are you with the academic admissions process? And I have one quick follow-up.
Chair Anderson, Regent McMillan, we are just really starting to explore that, and we have always, for a number of years, that one of our goals has been to make sure our 4-H'ers graduate from high school and go on to higher education. We're now just really trying to find a way to do a better job tracking them. And so, one of the examples I gave is that many other universities do on their admissions forms ask whether this person was a member of 4-H. And I think that would help us track them a little bit because, 4-H is a volunteer program. They come into our program, some come out, they go in again, and trying to track them is more difficult. But we are working that. We do have now our statewide enrollment form. It's our website, and so we're having a little bit better way of tracking them. And one other issue we do have is that once they leave as an alumni and go out into the world, it's harder to keep track of where they came from too, and to make sure that we have good addresses for them as their alumni. So we need more help on that. But, I have had some conversations with Bob McMasters, and I think we need to have more about how we can be able to use our system across the state to do a better job of helping to recruit, and I think helping in admissions and then retention. I think that keeping our 4-Hers connected to extension and 4-H can also help with retention too.
Thank you. Regent McMillan had an extra question.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. So in the words of the late Wayne Brandt, trees are Minnesota's tallest crop, and 4-H is always connected with ag. What happens with forestry, environmental science, long-term sustainability as you try to broaden and deepen the interest of ag? Are there plays there with those industries and, those interest areas? Because, of course, agriculture is critical and that's your roots, but I start thinking about how to attract more kids, whether it's 4-H or just these outreach programs. And of course, my congressional district is chock full of trees, so I always think about that industry. So any thoughts on how you keep moving beyond ag?
Right. Chair Anderson, Regent McMillan, as was just mentioned by Regent Rocha, is that our roots are in agriculture, they're in rural Minnesota, but our 4-H population now is very diverse. We have urban 4-H, 4-Hers in the Twin Cities area. We have, Alexandria, Moorhead, they're urban areas, and we have strong 4-H clubs in those urban areas too. We do have programs and natural resources for our 4-Hers, and you will see at the State Fair projects that they bring around natural resources. We have a lot of interest in water and water resources. We have clubs that are in aquatic robotics that are really looking at water quality, which is a big issue in Northwest Minnesota too. And so, the great thing about 4-H is that if there's an interest, we can help develop a club and a community around that. So directly to forestry, if you would like some of those numbers and just look at that, I can get those for you too. So thank you.
I still have many regions that want to speak. I think we have time for them. I'm going to just ask if we can be brief. Regent Rocha, you had a follow-up to McMillan's question.
All I wanted to say is that Regent McMillan, my kids and I spent about 2 hours at the 4-H building at the State Fair this last year. And the presentations, and a lot of them were on forestry and natural resources, and you can go and kind of see that there's clearly an interest and there's getting support like that. So I would encourage everybody when you're at the fair, make a trip through that and see the work that these 4-H kids are doing. Thanks.
Thank you. Regent Paul.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. At the risk of being repetitive, first of all, I do want to congratulate you on the program. It's such a terrific program that has adapted and evolved over time to, as you said, include many different disciplines and regions in the state. It's a wonderful program. And I think what you're hearing is I think we're just distressed that we're not able to get a higher percentage of the young students who go through the program. And you've already commented on how we're going to try to measure that better and put in programs in place. But 12% is just disappointing. And Madison, your insights on what we can do to improve that, and what we may be leaving on the table as we develop relationships with 4-Hers. I mean, all of that I think is really, really important. I think what you're hearing is a strong desire for us to figure out how to push that number up. So, not a question, just a comment.
Thank you.
Student Representative DeMuth.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, Regents. So I also speak from experience. I am from Grand Rapids. I actually have been involved in the State Horse Show for way more years than I probably would like to admit. But I am a product of both 4-H and also from FFA, so I have those experiences as well. Bouncing off of a couple different conversations that we've had, being from Grand Rapids, quite literally the only crop we do have is trees, so I can speak from that as well. That not only did my FFA program, but also our 4-H programs work together in order to produce different curriculum especially for our fourth graders in the area. I can also speak on behalf of an admissions process. So I do work in the admissions office at the University of Minnesota Crookston, and I can tell you from experience working with our application processors and our students that are coming through our doors, that especially since we moved towards our holistic review process, that we do actually ask students specifically if they've been involved in those types of opportunities. So that might be something I would imagine in the future we could actually collect those numbers from. As well, I was wondering if there is a specific thing besides, I mean, you talked a little bit about knowing that the admissions process might be something that causes students from 4-H backgrounds to hesitate. Is there any other specific things that you have noticed as well?
Chair.
Go ahead, Dean.
I think that what Madison said too is that there just is sometimes a hesitant for 4-Hers in outstate Minnesota to come to the cities. And I think that anything that we can do within 4-H, and we've concentrated on that a lot, is to get them on campus. Once they come to campus and any of our campuses, whether it's Crookston, Twin Cities, is that they see the opportunities and that they see that it is a place where they can succeed. And so, we need to keep thinking about how do we bring these 4-Hers on a campus and giving those opportunities, because as Madison said, once she's here, that it's not a scary place. It is a place where they can really thrive. So
I think from somebody that lives on the western side of the state, there is the proximity to Brookings and Fargo, and there's also the cost issue. Those are two factors that I'm guessing would come into play. So, Student Representative Muth, I have no doubt that you are better equestrian than Regent Rocha. I just want to know, do you take part in the equestrian program at Crookston?
I personally don't. My freshman year, I participated as a Minnesota FFA state officer. So with that opportunity in place, I was not able to participate at that time.
Okay, thank you. Regent Her.
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question, my comment was really based on Chairman Powell's, and that is that my understanding is that 4-H and Extension is the outreach part of our mission. So the idea that we are building these great leaders, getting them prepared, and that the university is not capitalizing on what we created in terms of potential talent and leadership and skills is very disappointing for me. So whatever we need to do, we must think about that and prioritize it, because for me is that investment in them and then not being able to utilize that investment is just actually breaking my heart. So kudos to you and your work and the great students the youth that you produce, but we want them. So just underscore that.
Sure, I understand. Regent Her, I agree. We need to have them at the University of Minnesota.
Regent Kenyana, you're going to bring us home on this.
All right, I'll do just that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for the presentation. I too, agree with a lot of what's been said around here, and want to, obviously explore ways we can capitalize on this. Dean Durgan, you made the comment that a lot of some of those 4-H rural Minnesotan students are afraid to come to Twin Cities, and immediately I was like, well, they don't have to. And I think this is just an opportunity to highlight our 4 other campuses that are elsewhere in the state. And this is a natural extension of the conversation that we've been having about system enrollment planning and whatnot. So it just, it reminded me of that. And I'd also be interested, as we continue to find better ways to track 4-H students, is not just how many of them are attending, but how many of them are applying. Then we can understand if there's some sort of gap there and how we can help them navigate the system and find the right campus for them. And then lastly, I would say that, obviously we want to capitalize and build and strengthen the pipelines, but I don't want the value of just 4-H itself getting lost. I think if someone participates in this program throughout their formative years and either attends another institution of higher education or doesn't attend one at all, I don't see that as a loss. We had this student for those years and they learned a lot and now they're a better member of society, and I think that does address our outreach mission, and we'd love to have them at one of our campuses, but there's value in just the participation. Thank you.
Thank you. So Dean Durgan, I'm just going to say a final comment. I think that I try to do my part for 4-H, and I just want to tell you that early on in President Gable's tenure here, she came through Alexandria, and I told my wife, where are we going to take her? I said, well, the county fair is going on. Let's bring her out to the county fair. So Angie and I baptized President Gable into Minnesota 4-H. She wandered around the fair, looked at the prize rabbits and the prize chickens and prize everything, and we had a good time, though. It was fun. Great time. Yeah. So thank you for what you do, and Ms. Muir, best of luck to you. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So our next report is going to be something I always look forward to, the status. It's an annual report on the status of university research and commercialization of technology. Vice President Christopher Kramer presents it. He generally does it with a dry sense of humor that keeps us moving along a little bit. We're virtually right on for our time, and we've got you for a 20-minute presentation and 15-minute discussion, if you can fit that in. We are ready when you are, Vice President Kramer.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, Provost Hanson, and members of the board. Setting the bar a little high on the dry humor, but I'll do my best to top that. So I start every presentation with the values of the Office of Vice President for Research: partnership, discovery, and integrity. Partnership, because everything we do is with the researchers around our great institution. Discovery, because that's what we're dedicated to, pushing back the boundaries of ignorance and creating new knowledge. And integrity, because we need to ensure that we do that in full compliance with all legal requirements, ethical requirements, financial due diligence, if you will. So we'll start with some, well, you said dry, so let's do statistics. They're usually kind of dry, but important because it's what we can measure and what we can quantify. So I am privileged and delighted to be able to tell you that this last fiscal year was fabulous from the standpoint of research awards. So we brought in $863 million in awards. That is a record at the University of Minnesota. Moreover, it is an enormous increase over the prior year at 8.8%. I don't remember an increase that large in my memory in any case. That color wheel you see there gives you an idea about the sources of income that comprise our awards. And so if you let me start at 12 o'clock and move clockwise, the biggest source of awards to the university is, of course, the National Institutes of Health. That's not too surprising. That's the federal agency that has a budget about 10 times any other funder. But it also reflects, of course, the breadth of our health care operation and the breadth of the health sciences that we do here at the institution. Other private is the next large section of the wheel there, and that's actually an agglomeration of a lot of things. It includes what you might think of as private as foundations, for example, private foundations, but it also includes basically every subcontract that comes to the university. So some funder has funded another institution, perhaps, where we have a collaborative relationship. They are the prime recipient, and we are a subcontract to them, and they all get put into that category for reporting purposes. So there could be federal money in there as well as private money, as well as business money if we're a subcontract to someone who's receiving from an industry. Business and industry is at a healthy $80.4 million. That also is up a nice proportion from the prior year. It's certainly something we're targeting, as federal funding always seems to be under pressure. And you'll see a graph in a little bit that'll give you a chance to compare some year-over-year things. After that, our state partners, the National Science Foundation, and so on around the wheel. And in the interest of time, I won't necessarily drag you through what every federal agency acronym is. If we break out how much of that is federal and how much is not, it's pretty typical for us. We get about 2/3 of our funds from the federal government and the rest from other sources. And as I always do, I want to give you not just the dry statistics, but at least provide you a few anecdata about some of the great things that are going on at the institution. So I'm going to start with something that has been funded by the National Science Foundation, and that I'm actually very passionate about, because I put some money in from my own office in my first year, because I really see the potential in this. And so this is harvesting big data and machine learning. These are, buzzwords that get thrown around a lot at the moment, but it's actually at the university that we know what they mean in depth and how to apply them. So the National Science Foundation has provided some funding to researchers in the College of Science and Engineering, as well as the College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resource Sciences, to really bring together very disparate types of data and create a platform that allows those data to be correlated against one another, mined for trends, and to give you a feel for what that is, because usually if you just say big data, people have a vague idea what that might be. But let's imagine that you're a farmer and you want to know what to plant in a certain plot of land. Well, imagine that you have satellite data and the pixels are, GIS data, if you will, over several years. And you also have weather data associated with that region. And you also have commodity prices over the course of time. And maybe you have the genetic information about crops that have been planted there before. So all of these data in and of themselves are not necessarily useful. But if you can identify the correlations between them and how each one might predict what would be the value of a certain crop at a certain time, that's going to help you make decisions. And it's along those lines. That's a single example. This is a platform that actually has very broad applicability. But I'm very excited about its potential, and it's attracted a great deal of interest. So I promised you a little bit of a comparison year over year of what we've been doing. So here's just a histogram of awards to the university over the course of the last 7 fiscal years. And what you see, I think, focusing on those last 3 bars on the right, that is a slope we would love to continue. I think it's a testament to some really great work that's happened in the last year or two. A really important component of that, I think I'll mention, is that the medical school had awards up 41% in the last year. It's a historic number. I almost hate to mention it because, that just sets the new bar for next year. Yeah. And I know Vice President Tolar thinks he can get over that bar again next year with another 41%. But it's a stellar achievement, and I'm very excited about what that means for the research outcomes we're going to see as that funding rolls into results. Also, I highlighted that it is the red bar there that shows kind of business and industry growth, and without assigning a number to it, I think you can see that we've increased compared to last year, and really we're at a pretty healthy margin compared to years previously. But essentially we saw an increase in every category except the state, and that's not that unusual. It's usually in the second year of a biennium we see the state funding drop a little bit, and then it's more robust in the first year. That's comparing ourselves against ourselves over the course of time. It's also, of course, useful to compare against our peers and aspirational peers. And so if we look at national rankings, I won't attempt to summarize every institution of higher education on the planet, but where we can compare ourselves, because it does, you heard a lot of comparisons this morning, I think, and comparisons between apples and blue were brought up, which I thought was a wonderful way to put it. The one thing that all institutions do is they report to the National Science Foundation in the same way, not their awards, that can be a little ambiguous, but their expenditures. So everybody agrees to do that. So these dollars are what we spent on research, not necessarily the awards we brought in for research. So we dedicate some of our own funding to research, our undergraduate research opportunities program, for instance. That spending counts as research, even though it's salary to undergraduates to do research, and you'll meet some of them in not long. But in any case, with that as a preamble, where the University of Minnesota Twin Cities stands is that we spent $954,683,000 in fiscal 18, and I have to give you the 18 numbers because it takes NSF a little while to publish these. They require that we do this campus by campus. If I roll that over all the campuses, that's the number you see at the left, $982 million. So that reflects the contributions from our other 4 campuses. And I can tell you, I know our fiscal 19 number, even though I don't know anybody else's, because we have reported it, and it's a bit over $1 billion. So I have stopped talking about hundreds of millions. I just call us a $1 billion research institution. It's cleaner. It's nice. It rolls trippingly off the tongue, don't you think? That number that I'm showing you puts us 9th in Publix in terms of research expenditures. Within the Big Ten, we're 3rd after Michigan and Wisconsin. Michigan has a whopping number there you see at $1.6 billion. I'll tell you, they put about $400 million of their own money in every year. That's one of the reasons they're so high, and they have the endowment that lets them do that. So it's a strong partner and competitor sometimes. There are other ways that institutions are ranked, and I think some of you have seen a few of these before. I'll just mention them in passing in this table. So the Center for Measuring University Progress, that's that CMUP category. And what they do is they have 25 different categories. I'm sorry, they have 9 different categories, but they look for the the 25 schools that are at the top in those categories. And they're not all research. One of the categories is R&D expenditures. Another is philanthropic giving to the institution. Another is faculty awards, doctoral degrees awarded, and so on. So it's not just a research measure. But in any case, there are only 8 schools in the United States that are in the top 25 on all 9 of those criteria, and we're one of them. You see 3 others reported in this table that are in the 9 of 9 category. Then there's the academic ranking of world universities that's done by the University of Shanghai. They have their own metric system, which I actually think is a little silly in some of the things they measure. They measure how many Nobel Prize laureates you have on your faculty. It does turn out that you can do a lot of important work without having somebody who won a Nobel Prize around. But in any case, if you look ranked in the entire world, they put the University of Minnesota 41st, and then if we go all the way over to U.S. Publics, 11th, so rather close to the 9th that we have, excuse me, based on our research expenditures. All right, it's time for another story after statistics. So let me tell you something that comes out of private funding. And I think, I try to select these stories to give you an idea of the breadth of what we do around this institution. So I've chosen this one, which is funded by PCORI. That's the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. And for those of you who might not have heard of that before, that was actually created by the passage of the Affordable Care Act. It is a nonprofit U.S. entity that awards funding in the healthcare area. But this is a collaboration between the University of Minnesota and the VA hospital, and it's led by Aaron Krebs, as you see there, who has an affiliation with both of those institutions. And it's looking at treatment options that help injured veterans control pain and not necessarily have to use opioids in order to do that. Now, obviously, that's terrifically important to the veterans who are being cared for at the VA, but this is a much more general societal problem, obviously, pain management and how we might find alternatives to opioids when it comes to care. So I think this is important work, and we're very pleased to be participating in it. I'll also call out something from the really small angle of the wheel because I wouldn't want to suggest that our researchers are not endlessly creative and aggressive and going after funding from wherever they can find it. So the National Park Service does not have the largest budget of the federal government, but if they are giving away money, we want some of it. And in a very important work that's happening in Duluth, and it's just something about the blue heron. I have to have it in every one of my talks. I know Regent McMillan still fondly remembers that 20 below day on the dock with me. But this study is using National Park Service money to look at algal blooms, harmful algal blooms that have begun to increasingly be a problem on Lake Superior, as well as many other bodies of water in the state of Minnesota. And this is associated with climate change. As temperatures warm, the opportunity for these algal blooms to happen is increasing. And the danger associated with them, besides the fact that they're just unsightly, if you've seen one of them, the lake becomes kind of this slimy green mess. But as that algae dies and falls to the bottom of the lake, it actually consumes oxygen from the water as it decomposes, and it creates anoxic zones which kill off the fish, kills off everything that needs oxygen in the lake. And so there's an opportunity, I think, to learn how to better manage our Great Lakes ecosystem through this research, and also to leverage it, even though the National Park Service is not necessarily a huge source of funding, to leverage it to other sources that will be interested in this outcome. So I'm going to switch now and talk a little bit. The report is about both research and technology commercialization, and I've changed it a little bit on my slide because I think we're evolving, all universities are evolving, not just to think of it as technology commercialization, but also the degree to which we're really doing economic innovation and supporting economic development in the state through activities above and beyond our typical sort of licensing activities. I would not want to start without noting that innovation requires innovators. So one of the best parts of my job is I try about once a week, maybe more if I'm lucky, to get into somebody's lab and learn about what they're doing and what their research group is doing. And that helps me represent the university better in what I do, and it also expands my knowledge, which is the joy of being at a university. You learn something new every day. And so here we have Professor Swati Moore. If I start at the upper left, of the Center for Drug Design, Professor Abbas Abdunur of Bioproducts and Biosystems Engineering, down from there, Professor Lucy Dunn of the Wearable Technologies Laboratory at the bottom. On the right, Professor Camille Ugerbil of the Center for Magnetic Resonance Research, and then finally Regents Professor Vipin Kumar from Computer Science and Engineering, all regaling me with exciting stories that sadly you would not end by 12:15 if I told you every one of these stories. So I won't, but I do want to emphasize that this is the human capital that makes these innovations happen, and recruiting and retaining these faculty is what makes this happen. Also, what makes it happen is a fabulous staff. So these are people in the Technology Commercialization Office, which is part of the Office for Vice President for Research. You can sort of see the smiling face of its Executive Director, Rick Hipsch, in the upper right in the back, because he's putting his team in front of him. And just a few numbers there. We have 900 plus active patents at this stage, 1,800 plus current licenses, and we've launched 150 startups since we started launching startups. And as long as I said startups, let me emphasize our really robust activity in this area, which in fact has made us a pretty close partner with Commissioner Grove of the Department of Employment and Economic Development. Many of you, I think, know that one of Governor Walz's initiatives was Launch Minnesota, which was asking DEED to come up with a way to foster more startup activity across the state in various zones. And Rick Hipsch, who I mentioned before, serves on the advisory board to Launch Minnesota, and they have been engaging with us quite a bit to talk not only about sort of best practices within doing startups, but also the opportunities to leverage expertise in, say, the Carlson School, as well as our MinCore operation for doing education for entrepreneurs who are interested in this area. And that's happening as well in Duluth at the moment as one area we're targeting that looks like it has a good environment. We may be able to help jumpstart. So I won't go through every number here. I told you 150 plus startups, 151 startups since 2006. Instead of dwelling on numbers and details, oh yeah, this is the new slide that Dan added, and that's why it says slide added since docket. Okay, these are the, I knew that was coming. One way that you measure success with startups is what happened to them after they left the university. And so we just wanted to highlight that in the last couple of years, there has been a remarkable series of successes in terms of startups that were acquired or had IPOs or in some way exited would be the term of art. And I won't go through what every one of these does in the interest of time. I'll say that what's represented here includes things like cancer treatments, genetic manipulation, learning technologies, and your gut microbiomes in there as well. So, you know, a testament, I think I would say, to the degree to which our efforts to make sure that the startups are successful after they launch is manifest in these acquisitions and public offerings. All right, now here's the story that I wanted to tell you. I just want to mention one that happened within this last fiscal year. And so this involves Vascudyne. So Vascudyne was built off the work of Professor Bob Tranquillo, so a longtime department head of biomedical engineering. And his work looked at the challenge when you surgically replace a heart valve, for instance, in a child who needs that valve replaced. Well, as the child grows, technology previously had required that valve be replaced again and again and again with valves of the proper sizes, because of course as you grow, your heart valves grow as well. And Bob Tranquillo's real breakthrough was finding a way to generate a tissue and a matrix on which that tissue was based that would in fact grow with the individual when implanted. So it also sort of self-heals, incidentally, if it's damaged up to a certain point. And so that created some intellectual property that was then used by Vascudyne, and of course we license to Vascudyne, so it's a source of ongoing revenue to the institution if the company does well. This is a table with a lot of numbers. I actually am known in chemistry for giving a talk to graduate students called the How to Give a Talk. And one of the things I tell them is never have a table unless you intend to discuss every number in it. And then later on in the talk, I also tell them, by the way, I've violated every rule I've ever given you. So here I am, I'm going to violate that rule, but I will call your attention to a few of these things. The lines in yellow, those are new records. So startup companies launched last year, 19, a remarkable number, about a company and a half every month. I teased them that it was fiscal 19 and they did 19, so fiscal 20, they know what they need to do. Minnesota IP research agreements, so I'll remind you that that is where we have sort of template research agreements that give companies very clear options for about how they will fund research and potentially take licenses before with an upfront fee, after with a chance to decide about terms, and really smooth the process. And so we had 103 of those signed last year with the help of the Sponsored Projects Administration. That, again, is a new record. And the reason we want that is to show how easy we are to work with. The number of companies that have those agreements has now risen to 77, so that's a new record, and that's great. The more companies we have and the more word on the street there is of how easy it is to do this work, that's terrifically important. The last line also should be in yellow. I noticed that it is also a record of $22.5 million in research commitments from business and industry associated with this process. Business and industry, as you saw, was about $80 million last year, so they come in through a variety of portals, if you will. But this particular one was responsible for about a quarter of the activity. And I won't dwell on the other numbers on this page. I will offer an example, though, of one of the components in this business and industry funding, and this is work that's been sponsored by Donaldson Company. So that's a Minnesota-based developer of filtration technologies. And so they're looking at ways to do separations of contaminated liquids, for instance, liquid-liquid separations, liquid-solid separations. They've sponsored 8 different MNIP projects at the university since 2015. And we're so happy with the results and the outcomes of that work that led them to actually sign a master agreement with the institution. And so a master agreement essentially further facilitates a business funding research projects, because instead of needing to renegotiate the contract associated with each project, there's already a framework, and they just slot it in under that framework, and it can launch immediately. So an important example, I think, of a good partnership and with a company that's here in Minnesota. I want to talk a little bit about, this is not a strategic plan discussion, this is the annual report, but I think it's worthwhile to touch on the strategic planning process that's ongoing, in particular because of the discussion that's been revolving around the President's commitment called Mintersections. And I had told you in October about various ways we incentivize research on things that are important to Minnesota. Mintersections is really designed to continue to capture that kind of research. I thought I'd tell you one ongoing project that happened within the last fiscal year that I think has a lot of potential for improving the health of Minnesotans, and that involves pharmacogenomics. So pharmacogenomics is an evolving, I'll call it, area of healthcare where the treatment of the individual patient is dependent on their genetics. Right? Certain kinds of drugs work well with people who have certain genetic makeups, but not with others who have different. And as we continue to gather more data to understand that, we're getting better and better at targeting exactly the right therapy to the individual. But I think you'll immediately recognize that if you now consider the entire healthcare system, it raises some very complex issues, ethical, legal, medical. How do you acquire that genetic data, and how do you make it available to the healthcare providers who need it while at the same time protecting the privacy of it so that it doesn't get into the hands of people who don't need it? And so this funding of this Grand Challenges project, which came out of the Provost's office and the Grand Challenges initiative, is a combination of people with medical expertise, legal expertise. The Consortium on Law and Values is a player in this, and I think it's helping to make this more of a reality in a way that everyone will be comfortable with and will meet the highest sort of legal and ethical standards. Another way that, of course, we incentivize research on issues of importance to the state of Minnesota is the MnDrive funding we have from the state specific to that. I gave you a pretty complete briefing on that in October, so I don't want to take up your time for questions by going more into it. Here are many of the metrics and numbers we put together to illustrate some of the breadth of the research that's happened. I usually like to cite that within those 5 areas that you see represented by the icons, we've had a terrific ability to leverage new dollars from external agencies, typically federal agencies, because of the state investment, and that so far that's $360 million based on a state investment of $97 million. And it includes not just federal agencies, but also private entities. So you see in there 3M, PepsiCo, Boston Scientific, Midwest Dairy, and private foundations, the Parkinson's Foundation, for example. And importantly, we actually did a survey of everyone who has been involved in MnDrive research over the course of the last few years. And amongst the questions we asked on that survey was, how do you feel about being a Minnesotan based on what you've done with MnDrive? And what was reported to us was that participating in MnDrive research made the individual researchers, and remember, we recruit from all over the nation, right? So not everybody is a native-born Minnesotan on the faculty or research staff of the University of Minnesota. They reported a greater sense of belonging and pride in Minnesota. And, when we talk about retention strategies, it's a pretty cheap one to get people just feeling loyalty to the institution through this kind of a mechanism. So I was really excited to see this outcome. I think it's wonderful. I will sort of wrap up by mentioning my mantra, research is teaching. So, of course, I have told you some dry numbers and some good stories and their impact, but I want to remind you that while I called out some faculty researchers when I was talking about innovation, those faculty are typically supported by teams, and those teams very often include students. In fact, I would say almost always include students. And those students are graduate students, undergraduate students. So our research here, as illustrated in this graphic, designed by CLA students, shows how our research evolves into teaching. It's just intimately a piece of teaching. It's all woven around our public service mission to the state of Minnesota. But we're training those students with the skills to discover new things by having them in that research environment. When they leave, they have skills they can't get from any other institution in the state. We are the largest research institution in the state, and we can offer experiences that others can't. So as it says at the end in the bottom right there, we embed discovery in our curriculum. And here's just one example, and obviously you're going to get a chance to meet quite a few more in not too long. But Kovic Odiambo here, who's an undergraduate in the College of Liberal Arts in statistics, and he actually did a summer internship in the College of Biological Sciences, looking at how bacteria can mitigate harmful effects from fertilization and runoff of fertilizer and the like. And that actually involved, I will call out, a collaboration between the North Star STEM Alliance. And so that is an organization that seeks to increase representation of underrepresented groups in STEM fields, science, technology. Good Lord, I've used STEM so often I have to remember what the acronym stands for. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There it is. And our MnDrive program, so really touched a lot of areas. I told you I get the fun of going to labs. Listen, I never miss a poster session if I can help it. So, and I'm hoping I can join you at yours in just a short while. But this is a little panoply of photos from poster sessions I've gone to and listened to these students talk about their research. And there is nothing more energizing than a student excited to tell you about what they learned, what the impact is, and realizing how that's going to change their future, and they're going to be able to use those skills incredibly effectively. So I said I'd wrap up with the students. Actually, I'll wrap up ever so slightly with strategic planning. So these are my office's strategic priorities: enhance research excellence, promote and sustain research integrity, accelerate the transfer of knowledge for the public good. And I discussed with the board in October the idea that we would also roll in, as we align with the full system-wide strategic plan, some 5-year goals. And I've just reproduced those goals down below. And we are in the process of doing that. Up at the top there, you see I've got the arrow. We're really, we fall most clearly within the President's commitment of discovery, innovation, and impact, although we'll certainly have some roles in other areas, and I mentioned intersections. But I have a sort of tiger team assembled, and in fact, they met for the first time yesterday, the leadership did, to try to put some metrics and some strategies behind some of those 5-year goals where it's not as obvious what the metrics might be yet. The first couple of bullets the first bullet's pretty easy. That just is metrics. But we're looking on a timetable that's consistent with the President's planning to really bring that into full alignment and be ready to share that at the appropriate time. So that completes what I want to say, other than I really want to thank my extraordinarily talented staff who put an enormous amount of time and effort into this report. And sometimes I think they're a little taken aback that their vice president, who is used to, as a faculty member, giving like 30 presentations, 40 presentations a year, kind of treats this as it's just another presentation. How hard could it be? But they put their heart and soul into this. So I hope I've done them credit, and I'm looking forward to addressing your questions and discussion.
Thank you, Vice President Kramer. Again, it's very, very concise, and it's always good to get and always good to learn what's going on in technology and commercialization and the the award grants and expenditures. We've got about 5 minutes for questions because, as you're aware, we are going to be having lunch with those undergraduate research students, and they're probably waiting for us right now. So I'm going to ask the questioners. I've got 4 lined up to be very brief, maybe yes/no questions to the Vice President. Can be very simple.
Chair Anderson, I'm going to believe that when I see it.
Okay. We're going to start with Regent Powell.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Chair Anderson. And Vice President Kramer, congratulations. I know that you say, look, I'm just telling the story of a very talented faculty, but you tell it extremely well. And I think that the goals that you're setting and the strategic clarity that you're bringing to this enterprise, it's really, really positive, and it shows in tremendous results that we've had this last year. Here's my question. That revenue line from licensed technology, we love that line, and we like that it's going up, and I think it's at about $22 million. We've discussed as a board if are we trading away that technology, those licenses a little earlier? If we could invest a little more, is there a way to maybe develop more revenue from the IP that we're creating? And I'm just wondering if you could quickly give us your views and help us in how we should think about that opportunity.
Yes. All right, I'll give you a more in-depth answer. Chair Anderson, Regent Powell. It's important, I think, to have sort of benchmarking and reality checks in what happens within this space across higher education institutions. So 80% of tech transfer offices lose money. That's just the state of the art, if you will. 20% make money, and we're typically in the top 25. And we are routinely in the top 25. Many institutions kind of go in and come out because they want a big lawsuit. So that year they're in, and the next year they're out. And so one number that you can use to kind of compare people who are making money, if you will, is what are the revenues compared to the total research expenditures. And so the scholarship in this area says that most institutions are around 1 to 3%. This last year, we're 2.3%, I believe. And the year before that, it was the last year that Autumn reported, so you can, that's the Association of University Technology Managers. So you can make a comparison against institutions, and I think we were 17th and we were at 2.4%. So we obviously worked very hard to try to achieve the most return possible on extraordinarily early stage research. So it's very high risk, and people who come in are expecting to have high rewards based on taking high risk. There may be new best practices that we will create that will take us out of that traditional range, and we're exploring a variety of things that I think if I try to go into all of them, Chair Anderson would throw something at me. But that's really the place we're starting from as a base and working on.
And it's best left for another time. Student Representative Tojo Garcia.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, VP Kramer. Representative DeMuth and I have been working on matters concerning students in relation to the university's mission of research and discovery, and we're interested in finding out about more stories like that of Kobik Odiambo. How do you find out about these projects, and is that information publicly available?
Chair Anderson and Student Representative Tojo Garcia. So there are a variety of ways in which students become involved with research. So let's say they're funded by the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program. For that particular program, there is an annual, it might actually be semi-annual, poster presentation, and a list of all the projects and the people who did those projects is provided by that office, which is part of the Provost's office. There would be ways to identify undergrads in research more generally just from the fact that they're on a payroll if they're being paid by sponsored projects. We don't necessarily pull all that and try to assemble it in a particular way. But frankly, individual departments are often pretty good on their websites and trying to highlight what undergrads are doing in research, because that's a recruiting tool for them. And so while I don't know that we have a real centralized source, perhaps other than the UROP program, that would be a suggestion.
I have been to the program in Northrop where they have the undergraduate, where they all put up their boards and everything, and it's well advertised, and there's a ton of them over there.
Thank you.
Regent Mayron.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Regent Anderson. And again, thank you for a fabulous report. I'm curious, when I was looking at the national ranking slide, it was at page 109 of our materials. This is my competitive nature. I'm trying to understand why some of the universities in the Midwest here, like our neighbor Wisconsin, which we are highly competitive in many arenas, not including athletics and others, why they're ranked higher than we are, what's driving their ranking. And again, it's not only my curiosity about why are they higher, but I have to imagine it too affects recruitment in terms of students who want to come to the university. You gave us kind of a high-level explanation what happens with Michigan, but do you have a sense, for example, of what's going on with Wisconsin versus Minnesota?
Absolutely. Wisconsin has something called WARF, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Fund. Many years ago, Wisconsin did two amazing things. They invented rat poison, and they figured out how to put vitamin D into milk. And the revenue from those discoveries was plowed into this entity called WARF, which does an enormous amount of internal funding of research. It does turn out Wisconsin has fallen in the rankings over the course of the last 2 years ago, largely driven by what I would characterize as state disinvestment in the university system. And that is something we all watch in the research community with a certain amount of dismay.
Thank you. Yes, good points. Regent Simonson.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Vice President Kramer. I echo what Regent Powell said and really appreciate what you're doing, and I look forward to your 5-year plan, and especially how you're going to grow the economic impact. That's obviously something I'm very interested in. A couple of quick questions. You might not be able to answer them, but I'm going to throw them out there anyway. Total research, I think you said $982 million. And I know not all of them, but a number of them have overhead associated with them. I think it's up to 50% or something. Do you have any idea how much that is of that 982 and how it's distributed? That's one question.
So this is a research expenditure number. It's a little easier to discuss the overhead in the context of awards, because that's the money that's actually coming in. So our full overhead rate is 54% at the moment. It's going up to 55 if I remember correctly. Certain agencies pay that full rate. NIH is a good example of that. Other agencies and other entities may not. And there are also certain activities that aren't necessarily subject to that full rate. I haven't given my indirect cost primer talk in a little while, but my memory is our average return is about 40 cents on the dollar, as opposed to it might even be in the high 30s compared to the 54 that is the current highest rate.
Okay. And second question, and patents, you mentioned we got hundreds of patents, which is, I appreciate that. But patents cost a lot of money. Maintaining them costs a lot of money. And I'm just wondering, of those patents, how many have we out-licensed and are we getting royalties from?
So the number of current revenue generating agreements on there is 571. It is certainly possible, of course, that some of those agreements are multiple agreements on the same patent. I don't know the exact answer to that. But let me give you a quick answer on what we do sort of in that space. You'll notice that what's on here includes the new patent filing rate. So step one is to decide whether it's economically sensible even to patent if we have a disclosure. And so there is a lot of due diligence that's done ahead of time. Step two is to look at your patent portfolio after a certain period of time and decide, should you just abandon certain patents? And it does turn out that there are brokers, I guess I'll call them, who may be willing to buy portions of your patent portfolio from you because they think there may be value in them, even though you haven't been able to find takers, if you will. And we're actively looking at whether we want to engage with some of those. Turns out some wear black hats and some wear white hats, and you'd kind of rather work with the white-hatted ones, but so we want to be very careful about that, but that's one option.
Thank you. We've got two brief questions, and then we've got to get on to passing some, we have to have a consent report that has to be passed. So Regent Hsu, very briefly.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Vice President Kramer. I just have one quick question, and that is on the slide of how we compete with we're ranked.
Page 10.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, so you told us that Michigan self-funds about 400 million of their 1.6. What do we fund on our own? And how come we don't talk about that more? And is that number going up or down?
Oh, I would love to talk about that. Chair Anderson, Regent Hsu. So you can, in some sense, you can almost do the math here, right? I told you we had 860 million in awards. Here's 980 in expenditures. Now, in fairness, those are two different fiscal years because NSF takes a while, as I said, to report. But that number then comes in at about 140 million, 150 million, more or less. Keep in mind that MnDRIVE funding doesn't count as an award, right? That's a legislative appropriation. So that piece is in that 150 odd million. So we actually put a relatively small amount, because I'll emphasize that, you know, the UROP program, as I said, you're paying the students to do research. It's salary to a student. It's a research expenditure, but you could probably argue that that's actually in the educational mission side of the house as much as it is in the research side of the house. But in any case, that's the magnitude of the number.
So it comes to about 150 compared to Michigan's 400. Regent Rocha, take us home on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quickly, and on that same page, you've got the 982 system against the 954 for the Twin Cities campus. What's the one thing we could do centrally to integrate more with the system campuses and increase the amount of research going on the system campuses?
Be intentional is the sort of, I don't mean that to be a glib answer by any means. And so some of the things that I have tried to do in the last year, in fact, have been to do a little bit more asking things I control, like the Minnesota Supercomputing Institute, the Spark entity that I spun up to do large type grants. Really get out and talk to the researchers on those campuses, identify where there's overlap. The majority of that 982, incidentally, above 954, is actually from Duluth, so they contribute almost all of it. But that evangelization of what the research resources are, actually I was just talking with the Vice Chancellor from Crookston. We're setting up doing some training in February for the faculty at Crookston, kind of a grant writing 101 workshop. That's the kind of spade work you have to do in order to really give the researchers the tools to be successful.
Congratulations on a great trend, and I appreciate the answer.
Thank you. And now I'm going to ask Provost Hanson to tell us what's on the consent report. Once she does that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent report.
The Carlson School of Management is creating a Master's of Applied Business Analytics degree. CSE, Science and Engineering, is creating a Master of Science and a graduate minor in robotics. Bachelor of Science degree in Data Science. CLA, the College of Liberal Arts, creating a certificate in editing and publishing. The School of Fine Arts on the Duluth campus is creating a Bachelor of Arts degree in Arts Administration. There are as usual, a lot of changes in names and the subplans and some discontinuations, as always. The other thing you should note that's slightly different on this consent report is that it contains the request for approval of the human fetal tissue research report as required annually by the Minnesota legislature.
Thank you. Is there a so moved to accept it? Second? Was that a second, Regent? Yeah. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the consent report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Adjourn.